You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back, everybody, to Arsenal Pass. Here we are with our Uprising set review. Both Hayden and I have come back from world premieres. I played in Las Vegas. Hayden was able to play in Sydney, Australia. We both had a bit of success at the world premiere. I went 6-0 on Fi. Hayden also 6-0 on Fi. Does that mean that Fi is the best? I don't know. We'll dig into that. But yeah, I had a chance to actually play more sealed on that weekend because my team unfortunately didn't make day 2, but was able to open up my box that I won in the world premiere, play a bunch of sealed pools. We played on Sunday night as well, and I got in a couple drafts. So I feel pretty comfortable at the set at this point. Hayden, I know you had a lot of success in sealed, but unfortunately you're playing the top 4 of your calling on your free day, but also was able to get in a draft. And yeah, what do you, just quickly, let's have a one-word answer. What do you think of this limited set?
I'm going to go 2 words. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Anyway, let's go ahead and head into the news before we break down the set.
Yep, very much. Limited set review time. No news this week. We're just going to cut straight through to it. But next week we will be recapping the calling, talking a little bit about, our experience, a bit more about the world premiere as well. And of course, we'll have pre-release under our belt as well. So we will talk about this limited format more and more. Today is pure set review. Again, no command and cookout this week as well. But if you do want to get your questions in, please get them in. Either drop us a question on YouTube. I know we had one last week on the YouTube video. You can email them to us, arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. Tweet at us, DM us, whatever you want to do. If you're on the Discord, drop it in the channel. A big thanks to our patrons. Just want to give a big shout out to everyone. I met a few patrons over the weekend at the calling. Thank you to all those that support us and came up and said hello. And for those, of course, weren't at these events, we'll see you. We'll see you at some point soon. I'm sure of it. Otherwise, Brendan, where are we going? Set review? Is it time?
Set review, it is time, but we're going to do an A-B-C-D grade here. Maybe some Fs for some particularly bad cards. So the people need to know, Hayden, how do we evaluate these cards? What does it mean if something is an A? What does it mean if it's an F?
Yeah, so if you haven't watched one of our limited set reviews before, or you haven't ever watched a limited set review for other games, then I do just want to give you a bit of an overview of how we kind of do this. We talk about cycles in general, so we'll cover off cards that, of course, in Flesh and Blood have cycles. So we talk about these cycles all as one. One part is for time. Of course, we'd be doing triple length of the podcast if we didn't. And then the other part of that is that a lot of these cards are really similar in gradings with a few nuances around, which color of the cycle you want, or which pitch of the cycle you want, depending on your deck. And we'll talk about kind of the differences in power levels between maybe like the blue resource and the red is your power card. The scale. So we use an A, B, C, D, as Brendan says, with a couple of kind of like subgrades. A is the best of the best. These are the cards the ones that are going to be the focal points of your decks in Limited. You might call these bombs, I guess, in Limited. In a Fab context, these are auto-includes. Things that make you want to actively pursue the class. If they're class-specific, think Refraction Bolters, or maybe things otherwise like Enlightened Strike, Crippling Crush, Hardened Crossstrap, Drone of Brutality, Soul Reaping, Via the Vanguard, Awakening. These are the kind of cards that are going to be getting A grades. They can not necessarily always just stand alone win you the game, but they're going to do a big job of doing it. They could swing turns, gain a massive advantage for you, help initiate a massive pivot turn, or just win you the game, potentially. They can create huge setup situations. So Bs, these are your above average role players and cards that are important to an overall strategy for any given hero, or in the form of a generic, or in the form of a class card. These cards could be super efficient, above rate cards, or even cards that can support maximizing your A, so making your game plan even better. Examples would be Take Flight Red, Warmonger's Recital, Gallantry Gold, Sink Below Red, Snatch, Scar for a Scar, Goliath Gauntlet, Disable Blue, Salvage Shot, Plunder Run Red, Turn Timber, Bramble Spark, and Ball Lightning from the latest set, Tales of Aria. Cs, these are your true role players. These will make up most of your deck and support your overall plan. These are your bread and butter. They're going to provide good resources, help defensively, or be solid attack offensive options, or support with other actions. These cards are things like Ghostly Visit, Smash the Big Tree, Cross the Line, Brandish Red, Come to Fight Red and Blue, Sink Below Yellow, Throttle Red from the latest set. Could be something like Shock Striker, Frostfang, or Earthlore Surge, particularly in red, and all those are very good, solid role players. And then Ds. Ds are the cards you want to play as little as possible. This is pure filler. With no real upside, these cards are just going to be making up numbers in your deck. Don't do much. Could just be pure a resource card, or just a card that defends for 2 or 3. These sorts of cards would be things like Nimble Strike Blue, Emerging Power Yellow, Bloodspill Invocation Blue, Rejuvenate Blue, Chill to the Bone Yellow, And then, Brendan, finally, we have a couple of, I guess, subgrades here. Set upgrade. We'll give these cards that require a bit of, you need cards around them to make them work. Things like this would be Tear Limb from Limb, Moonwish and Sunkiss in the Kano limited decks of old, Maximum Velocity, Hurricane Technique, Tome of Fandal, Channel Thunderstep from the latest step, and Embolden. These cards that need other things around them to make them work. And then sideboard grades, just pure cards that come in for certain matchups. Blinding Beam, Eclipse Existence, Ray of Hope, and Talisman Dowsing, famously from Monarch. Cold Wave, So Tomorrow Red, Rites of Replenishment from our latest set, Tales of Aria. All right, Brennan, that is the grading system. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. Where we go next?
We're going to go to the stats. So the stats are really important in a set, particularly if you look back at something like Tales of Aria. The average block value of the set is quite low. It's going to be a lot different from Welcome to Wraith. Like, the thing is that everybody knows breakpoints in Flesh and Blood, right? You got 4, potentially 7, upwards and upwards in that sort of interval. But if all the generics block for 2 and the class cards block for 2 as well, your breakpoint could be closer to 3. So the average defense value of that set is very important. Defense reactions, right? What kind of defense reactions are we dealing with? Attack reactions? Are there any? What should I be worried about? Etc., etc. And of course, in this set, Arcane Barrier, because there is arcane damage. So Hayden, take us into the stats.
Yeah, so really interesting. Average defense value of this set is 2.41 for rare and common slot. This is non-token, non-equipment cards that we're talking about. So this is way higher than we've seen the previous two sets. Monarch was 2.24 and Tails was 2.26. So a real move on and sort of power level. And a big part of this, we're actually moving closer back towards Welcome to Wraith with this set. And a big part of that is we have less cards with 0 defense in this. You think Monarch with like all the brute cards that don't defend, and we just have a lot higher number of like generic, I guess, like 3s that defend, but then also with Draconic as well that defend 3. So a lot higher sort of depth of cards that do defend for 3 and then less defend 0. So looking at 2.41, which is quite high. So just interesting to note as you start to head towards the limited format, what does that mean? My kind of initial takeaway, I'm not sure about yours, Brendan, was that quite hard to fatigue people in this format. It seemed like, especially with fire decks and sealed, quite fast. But then even with like Dromai decks or Icelander decks, they had like a high percentage of defend 3s. But there's still a lot of damage in the set.
Weapons too. Weapons are very important. Famously, Arcane Rising, limited, sealed, and draft, but mostly sealed. You did see a lot of fatigue decks, so you could just grind people out because they didn't have weapons, right? You could just play more cards in them, and sometimes you come out on top. This set, we got a particularly powerful weapon in Ninja coming in for 3 for 2 resources. Of course, Icelander as well, although it does have some conditional. And then we go over to Dromai, who has that Kadachi-esque kind of thing going on, but you do have to go ahead and build it. I think in this set, it does seem like fatigue is not a thing. If fatigue was really going to be an easy strategy, you would have seen it at the world premiere. It is very famous for people to sort of play something called pile at the world premiere, right? Where they put all their playable cards together just because they want exposure, but also that strategy can be particularly punishing to people who don't have game plans. And in a world premiere, nobody does. But at this world premiere, we saw a lot of success with the 5 decks. We did see an Icelander and a Dromai as well in the undefeated list at Las Vegas. But needless to say, it looks like currently, at least in sealed, that fatigue is not going to be a dominant archetype.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. 1 cycle of defense reactions in the set. This is an elemental wizard rare defense reaction cycle. We have 3 attack reactions, 1 cycle for Ninja, and then we have 2 Majestics, 1 in Draconic Ninja and 1 in just Draconic. And then we have 5 instants. So we have 1 Wizard Majestic, 1 Draconic Majestic, 1 Illusion Majestic, so 1 for each. And then we also have a cycle of Draconic Illusionist, common instants, and then a cycle of generic, which we don't talk about that card because that might be one of my favorite cards in the set, but we'll get to that. Last thing, Brendan, before we jump into the set review, getting right into it with our generics to start with, I want to talk about some keywords because we do have a lot of returning keywords and then we have some new keywords. So we have a lot of returning keywords. You're going to see these, kind of some of the more notable ones are, of course, Arcane Barrier coming back. Negate from Crucible of War has come back, but that's sitting on Majestic. We've got Phantasm back, of course, from Monarch. Fusion is back from Tales of Aria. And then we have some new keywords. So we've got subtype keywords. We have Affliction, which is the new one that comes in on auras and basically puts an aura under your opponent's control and then gives them a negative effect. Then we have Invocation, which is, of course, these flipped cards. These are our dragons. And then we have new ability keywords in Quell and Ward. And Quell is what's going to help you prevent damage. So Quell says if your hero would be dealt damage, you may pay X to prevent X of that damage. If you do destroy Quell at the beginning of your end phase, of course, you'll see this on all the common equipment or majority of the common equipment with Quell 1. And then Ward, if your hero would be dealt damage, prevent X of that damage and destroy this. So we have Ward at different values. And then a few new effect keywords, Transform, of course, which is put X under this, create a Y and put the X under it. So this is our Ash, ate the Ash wings and our dragons. And then freeze, which I think is going to be a very important one in this format. A frozen object can't be played or activated, and most of the cards that you can see with freeze are Arsenal and Ally.
Freeze actually heavily outperforming, by the way. Particularly we'll get into it, but that permanent helm on the field that is an ice helm, like being able to tempo your opponent's arsenal, particularly around something like a pivot turn, very, very powerful. I think it was actually underutilized. But Hayden, let's go ahead and head into these generics.
Yeah, so I think we're going to do classic style. We're going to 1-for-1 it. We'll read the cards as always, and then we'll give our sort of notes and thoughts. Some will take longer than others, be a bit more discussion, and then of course we will give our grades. We've got to talk about Helios Mitre first. This is the card that you can add to your pool. This is a player may add a Helios Mitre to their card pool in Uprising limited format. It's a generic equipment head, defense for 0, and says instant, pay 2 resources, prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to your hero this turn by a source of your choice. Destroy Helios Mitre at the beginning of the end phase. The kind of first thing for me, Brennan, is I think this is such a cool way. I didn't even know this in the set until I got to the Uprising pre-release, the world premiere. I'm not sure about you, but I think this is such a cool way to give a little bit of balance to a format where you've got, of course, less head cards in general. You don't have, this is the head generic, right? Mm-hmm. And with something like Icelander in the format, and even something where you can actually, you've got Quell as this really strong ability, but then this is kind of like a step down that can still be used on the same turn, or instead of maybe using up on your Quell for a really key breakpoint. So I'd say, I think I used this as Grand Total of once in the world premiere, but I used it, I think, a couple more times in my draft deck that I played on the next day.
So I have used this card every single time I've played it because not of the damage. So you actually use this on turn 0 to often filter if your opponent opts to Arsenal Pass. If you're playing Draconic, you can make some Ash for free. But ultimately, that filter clause is quite good, especially on turn 0. So if your opponent is not attacking you or leaving a card in hand and you want to get that out of hand, that really helps. I think it's actually a great use case for this. Obviously, it can be used to prevent damage as well, but I will go ahead and pop it pretty early in the game in order to guarantee a better, or at least not guarantee, but try to get a better hand on the first turn of the game.
Yeah, pitch 2 red on the first turn. If you're in Draconic, even just, set up your hand, right? Often the classic. This format is really interesting about the play draw because something like Icelander can push damage on turn 1. Fire can even potentially push damage on turn 1. Draconic can set up, maybe a couple of Ash and some Aether Ashwing. So going second, you need to try and find some advantage sometimes. And, particularly with Draconic, one of the things you can do is, like you say, dump into this for some Ash. So this card's super interesting. Look, I think if, this card's going to be in the set. Everyone has access to it. So I'm just going to give this card a solid C to start us off here, I think. This is... yeah, it's good. It's really interesting piece of design, and the fact that everyone starts with it, getting advantage out of this, unless you have another headpiece, is going to be a part of the game of Limited.
So I will also give it a C as well for the exact same reason, but it doesn't compete with very much, so it is going to be relevant in your deck, and you'll probably be playing it a lot. That being said, we do have another headpiece in particular that I think I already mentioned that is going to creep up in that grade for me because the effect is much more impactful. Anyway, next here, we have Quelling Robe. This is a generic equipment chest at common, 0 defense, but it has Quell 1. So it says if your hero would be dealt damage, you may pay 1 resource to prevent 1 of that damage. If you do, destroy Quelling Robe at the beginning of your end phase. So Hayden, I don't think this is a piece of armor that I would actually first pick in draft. I think there are a few pieces that I would pick highly in the set, but looking back at something like Tales of Aria, where we had cards like Deep Blue potentially to be opened in the pack at generic, this doesn't really, it's not up there for me, not quite there. That being said, it is better than having no armor. It is a permanent on the field, and Quell is definitely extremely relevant, particularly in some of these arcane decks if you don't have Arcane Barrier. So while this isn't, it isn't an A for me because it is competing with stuff, or, it's just a C again. It's just pretty average. I would be happy to have it if I can have it, but I'm not picking it early in draft, and I'm not going to particularly miss it if I don't open it in sealed.
I think Quell is really, really powerful. Really powerful. I was having a discussion. I was saying to some of my friends at the world premiere, how powerful I thought Quell was. And then they said to me, what is more impactful, Iron Rot, Ironhide, or Quell, in their respective sets? I think it's close, but I think Quell has this. I think we're going to see Quell get better and better as people understand the power of some of the ways you play on your opponent's turn. Some of the cards like Oasis, which we'll get into. And I will say that Quelling Robe, I think, is the weakest of the Quell cards because it competes with what I think are two of the best equipments in the set.
Yep.
In spoiler alert, in the chest zone. But I, like you said, you wouldn't take a first pick in draft. I mean, I probably would in a lot of draft picks where the pack's kind of weaker if I don't want to hedge on something. And I'm not upset to have Quelling Robe. Like I want probably one of the other two if I'm respective in Wizard or Draconic. But having a Quell card, I think, is never bad because I actually think we'll get into this. But I think the number of blues that I thought you wanted to play in your deck is actually way higher because of Quell and because of things that you can be doing and because of what Icelander wants to do as well. So I'm going to give this a C+. I think, as I say, I think I would give it higher if it had less competition because I do think Quell is really strong. But because of what it's competing against in that slot, I'm gonna roll with a C+. Could be a B- for me, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up, Brendan, we have Quelling Sleeves. So moving through to the exact same text on Quelling Sleeves as Quelling Robe. It's another common generic equipment. Arms this time, defend 0. I think this one competes with the least. So I actually think Quelling Sleeves is the best of the generic Quell cards.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're probably going to end up playing this. So this competing against Heat Wave and then the Ice one, which both are very good effects, but I think not quite as strong as the chess piece. Like I would prioritize the chess piece from the other two respective heroes over those. So yeah, Quelling Sleeves, I would be more likely to, I guess, first pick. I think if we're using that kind of metric, Quell's strong. I think we're going to see how strong Quell is. So for this one, I think I'm up in the grades. I'm giving this like a B-. I think.
Yep, B- for me as well, for the exact same reason. Heat Wave and the Frost Armor. So the Frost Piece equipment, particularly for Icelander, it needs other synergy, right? It doesn't feel as good on its own. So that's particularly why Quelling Sleeve rises up for me. Heat Wave, obviously good, but it doesn't feel like it really. It's just good sometimes, right? When you're able to get those 2 Phoenix Flames, potentially even 3 somehow. But other than that. I would put this at a B- because it's just not competing with too much. So next up, we have the Quelling Slippers, the same thing, but in the foot slot. Quelling Slippers for me, I think it's going to be a C probably, or a C+. So in Dramai, you're competing with the boots that allow you to play something with Phantasm, and pay 3 and basically get that action point back. And then in Wizard, I have to remember, I think in Wizard, you're not competing with anything. And then in Ninja, is there anything in Ninja, Hayden? You remind me?
Yeah, Ninja has the Arcane Barrier.
Yes, those are incredibly good. Yeah. I think that you're going to want to prioritize some of those Arcane Barrier armors. They also have very good effects on them as well. So yeah, Quelling Slipper is going to be a C+ / C for me.
Yeah, I was trying to look up. Yeah, I think you're right. There's nothing competing in the league slot for Wizard. So this seems really powerful in Icelander, but less so in maybe the other two. I think it's a B- for me. I think I would go like C+, B-, B on terms of the 3. So I would rate it as this is the middle. The arms is the strongest and the chest is the weakest, just in terms of literally what they're competing against and what I want in that slot, like best in slot. But again, I think as we're going to go, I'm going to talk more about Quell and where I see kind of the impact of Quell as we go through and talk about some of the cards that Quell works really well with and some of the sort of play patterns. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think me and Brendan have this time not shared notes. So we're coming in with cold on our grades. We don't know what each other's grades are. So far, pretty close. I'm waiting for some spice to come out though. But yeah, B- for me there, Brendan. Next up, we're through our generic equipment and we're into our first generic attack action. This is at rare. It's called Flex. We're looking at the red one here. It's a 0 cost, defense for 2, attacks for 4, and says when you attack or defend with Flex, you may pay 2 resources. If you do, it gains +2 attack. I really like this card a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think having a resource sink in this game is really important. So, sometimes you draw the double blue, you can't defend with them in a reasonable manner, but you can actually, use 2 resources to pump up this attack to a 6 attack on offense. And then, of course, on a defensive turn, you can, Phantasm something like a dragon or a Phantasm attack and pay the extra 2 to do so. And then maybe just something like Quell 1 with the other resource if you pitch to blue or play something even like an Oasis Respite. So I'm quite high on Flex. I think this card's really good. I had 2 red ones in my my Fire World Premier deck. To be fair, they weren't as good as I thought they were. I was like, oh, this card's like crazy good. I'm always going to be able to sink resources, but the Fire deck I actually found was like quite resource hungry on offense. And I was cutting this card versus Icelander, but I also really like the blue version as well, like a blue that you can then turn into a 4 attack and sink resources into. Like I'm all in for that. So I think red is probably like the best, and then blue is slightly behind, and yellow is still fine. I'm actually gonna give this card a B minus. I think this is in the B range. I think this card is good.
Yep, I actually gave it a B. At red, particularly at red, I think that it's really good. And at blue, for the same reason, if you can go 0 for 4, it is definitely not bad if you draw one of those blue heavy hands. But the red also functions as a popper as well, which is quite good. So this is just I think that this card is a card that I'm picking early in draft if I see it. Quite good.
Mm-hmm.
So next up, speaking of poppers, we have Fyendal's Fighting Spirit. This is a generic attack action. It's a 3 cost, and at red it does 7 damage, yellow 6, and it defends for 2. It's a rare. So it says, when you attack or defend with Fyendal's Fighting Spirit, if you have less life than the opposing hero, gain 1 life. So I think this is one of the, this is pretty much the premier popper, in my opinion. This is the one that you want to get if you can get it, because you can get it in yellow, right? So it can function as a resource card. It does block for 2, not 3, but 2 is pretty average for the set. So Fyendal's Fighting Spirit, yellow and above, I'm actually looking at a B. I really, really like this card.
I had a note, and it was, is this the best generic in the set at common or rare? And then I just thought about it for a while, and I thought, no. But someone said that to me. Someone said to me, do you think this is the best generic in Limited? And I'll talk about why I don't think it is. I actually think Flex is slightly better for me, just in terms of I think it's really close. I think this is probably like a C plus B minus for me at yellow and red, like you say. I think blue has less utility, just doesn't have that popping ability. But that life gain is like really huge. Like life is really important in this format because of all the incidental damage, because of what Icelander can do, because of like breakpoints on fire decks and stuff, and obviously what Ashwings can do at the end of a game. If you can gain life sort of here and there, it can be a big, really big advantage. Plus, like you say, it's a phantasm popper, and it's just a good threat. There's not a lot of just like good meaty threats outside of course, you have some of the phantasm attacks and Dromai. But then otherwise, like, what else attacks for 7? There's very few things in the set. So unlike something like Welcome to Wraith, where you have a lot of these kind of style of attacks. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it's pretty good. But you talked about like the premium popper in the set. I think there's one more card we're going to get to soon that I think might be the premium popper. I'll come up to a B minus. I think it's probably on the level of Flex, maybe C plus.
Yeah, I like the idea of being able to have that popper as a yellow, so as like a functional resource card as well. Particularly if I'm not playing something like Fi, or I guess probably playing Icelander. It just seems it's really good. It's really good. The 3 cost is very expensive though, so I think I'd rather be attacking with Flex if I could.
That's kind of, yeah, my issue is actually with the resource costs, because I think the set is like super resource restrictive. It's not like some of the other sets where you can have some floating resources often. And I actually think that's why we're seeing cards like Flex and Brothers in Arms, which we'll talk about soon, these resource sinks, because in other sets, these resource sinks would have been super powerful because you often have these floating resources. In the set, it's a lot harder to have them, I think. So because there's just a lot of different things you want to be doing on your turn. So, and Quell, of course. So yeah, 3 cost is a bit restrictive. I tell you what, I'm going to give yellow a B minus, C plus for red, and a C for blue. How about that?
Sounds good.
Next up is Sift. We have another rare, this time a generic action, a non-attack action. It defends for 3, costs 0, and we're looking at the red version here. And it says, put up to 4 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck, then draw that many cards. Go again. At yellow, 3 cards, blue, 2 cards from your hand on the bottom, and draw that many cards. So my kind of first question, right, is like, what is this good for, Brennan?
So it's good for putting Phoenix Flames on the bottom of your deck in case you draw them, I think. That's really the use case that I've seen. And obviously you can filter out cards that you don't want in your hand, but I feel like that use case is kind of weak. I don't know. I think as a blue that blocks 3, I would put that in quite a few of my decks. Outside of that use case, maybe I'm missing something, but I'm not a huge fan of this card.
Yeah, so in previous sets, like a blue non-attack action was like kind of premium, something like a Rosetta Thorn, right? That had just natural go again on it. Yeah. Where I think this actually does do some work, right, is that it can help you filter high or low resource hands, which I think can be a problem in this set, because I think you actually want to play more resources than you think. But also for something like Dromai, you want reds, right, to pitch, and you want gas cards, and then sometimes you're going to get these clunky hands either with no resources or a lot more resources than you want. But the red as well can also turn on the go again, right? Because you play a red card, gets go again. So for Dromai. So yeah, I think this is you don't want this card in your deck. I don't think.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong, but I'm not very excited about this card. I'm going to give it like a D plus though. I don't think it's quite a straight D. I think this does have some utility in red, but and blue being defend 3. But I think otherwise it's pretty poor.
Yeah, I had C minus only because it's a blue block 3. I think in like something like Icelander, it can be okay if you have a fuse heavy deck. There's a card we're going to talk about in Icelander, which I think is absolutely busted, which not a lot of people are not talking about. That does depend on a fuse. So that I might play it for that reason, but blue block 3 is the main reason I'm putting this in my deck. I'm not going to be sad if I do that, to be fair. If I'm in C, especially if I'm in sealed, I'm not going to be sad to have a blue block 3, but it's pretty unexciting. So next,
I think it's a card you want to play as little as possible. Also, I want to know if our Icelander cards that we think are super strong are the same card, because there's one card that I was just like, this card seems crazy. But
So next up we have Strategic Planning. It's a generic non-attack action. It costs 1, and we're going to be looking at the blue one here. It says put an attack action card with cost 0 from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's deck. At the beginning of your end phase, draw a card, go again, and it does block for 2. This card is a bit innocuous. I when I first saw this, I was like, wow, I thought this card is really bad. I'm not going to lie. I thought this card is trash. Then I played Fi, and somebody put my Phoenix Flame on the bottom of my deck, and I was like, a blue that does that seems okay. Outside of that, I feel like this card is pretty unexciting. For me, I gave it a C+ against Fi. I think that's very impactful if you put that starting Phoenix Flame on the bottom of the deck. But outside of that, I'm not playing this card.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, that's an interaction I hadn't really thought about, I guess. I like this card more than Sift. I like that you can get back a threat, is more what I'm thinking about. Potentially, if that's relevant, right? If second cycle is relevant. And the fact that it replaces itself at the end of turn for Arsenal. But then you're really gambling on like what the card is that you put into Arsenal. So it's not, I think in terms of the fact that it replaces itself, there's some upside to Sift, right? And then like what you said, blue has utility, but then it defends for 2 as well, right? So it's really going to depend on your targets. It's going to depend on how this format plays out with like if second cycle is actually relevant, and also how good putting a Phoenix Flame on the bottom is. But they can also respond by pitching a blue and putting the flame in their hand potentially on your own turn. So I don't think so. A C is like the core of your deck, right? To me, this is like a D+, maybe a C- in the right deck. Like I don't want this card in my deck. I don't think.
Yeah, this feels like one of those cards where it's like, I'm just kind of not understanding like what it's supposed to be doing, and it just kind of sucks, but then maybe it might have some use case.
You're like using a hedge grade. You're like, oh, I'll give it a C+.
Yeah.
I'm given like, that's like a quelling rope. Like, I don't think this card's even near that kind of power. I think this card is like actively something I don't want. I'm definitely in the sort of D range here.
I think I'll play the blue against 5, but that's about it.
All right. Next up, we've got Brothers in Arms. This is the card I referred to earlier. So this is a 2-cost generic attack action. We're looking at the red one here. Attacks for 6 and defends for 2. And it says, when you defend with Brothers in Arms, you may pay 1. If you do, it gains +2 defense this turn. I'm really high on this card. Yeah, I'm really high on this card. At basically all of the cycles, but particularly red, because it's just a natural popper, like you say. Not that poppers are as important as they were in Monarch, and I think that's good to remember. But they are important, especially for some of the key dragons, which we'll talk to. There's some really strong dragons. But then it's also just a threat. It's a 2-cost threat that you can play on the end of your chain. I think in like something like Fi, maybe you come up with a 0 cost, and you come up with a 1 cost, and then you come up with this. That's quite strong. Or there's that one that turns your next attack into a draconic attack, and then you could get back your Phoenix Flame to put an Arsenal or something. So I think Brothers in Arms really strong, and then of course the defensive ability because of Quell. Pitch a blue, defend with this plus Quell 2 times, so that's 3 resources, 2 cards, 6 defense, 6 damage, spread as well. You can spread that damage. So I think Brothers in Arms is very strong. I think this is the sort of card that I'm gonna first pick all the time because I think I'm gonna play it in every deck. It has utility. At blue, it's a resource card that also defends well and can be a threat in a pinch. And then at red is just a good threat, a popper, and of course a good defensive card. So I'm giving this I'm gonna give this a B. I think I thought about maybe B-, but I actually think this is one of the best generics in the set. I think it's the best generic at common and rare, apart from equipment.
So I do agree with you. It's the best generic. I think Oasis Respite will get there. But I give it a B-. It's got to be honest. Have you convinced me to go to a B? Probably. I really like the red for all the reasons you said. I also like the blue, like in Icelander, as something that blocks for 4, and then I can play a 0-cost out of 0-cost blue out of Arsenal, and then go ahead and swing my my wand there. So I really like this card. At yellow, it's probably at its weakest, but overall, Yes, it is very close. I think that it either is or very close to the best common in the set. Oasis Spite seems a bit
Oh,
powerful.
yeah, I forgot about, yeah, I think second best. I take it back.
So yeah, okay.
It's very close, though. Very close.
All right. So next up, we have the first sort of vanilla card of the set, Critical Strike. It's a generic attack action. At common, it costs 1, and the red one attacks for 5 and blocks for 3. It is all flavor text on it. So yeah, this one for me is I think it's the epitome of a C. I like block 3s. Like block 3s are very, very good. I like that the yellow comes in for 4. I think that is particularly nice. But overall, I don't think I'm like super early picking this card. If I am, I'm probably picking it in 5, something where I can play it on the end of a combat chain and it's decent. But yeah, it's block value and it's stats, so not bad, not great.
Yeah, I just got in my notes, solid, solid, solid. Like this is, like you say, this is a solid C. Maybe in the right deck it's a C plus, but got to remember that this is not a draconic attack. So there is downside there, of course, for fire decks. In terms of like triggering that third chain link to get back your Phoenix Flame to maybe stick an Arsenal. But it also has utility in Icelander and Dromai. So yep, just a solid C all round for all cycles of this card. Next up, we have a returning icon, a very familiar card, Brendan. We've got Scar for a Scar. If you don't know what Scar for a Scar is, well, I'll read it again. It's a 0-cost generic attack action, defense for 2, and at red, which we're looking at here, attacks for 4. At common, when you play Scar for a Scar, if you have less life than your opponent, it gains Go Again. I mean, when I saw this card was in the set, I was like, of course it is. It's in Volcor. It's the perfect card for the set. It makes a lot of sense. I think this card is less important than it was in Welcome to Wraith. Because
yeah.
Okay, I'll go my reasoning, yours. I actually think just because Go Again is less of a premium, there's a lot of ways to get Go Again, and because of the way I was feeling, particularly in Sealed, a lot of the time I was feeling like actually taking the damage to give this Go Again was not a play I wanted to be on, because I wanted to utilize some of my Quell cards with resources, or I wanted to utilize more defensive cards with like Oasis Respired, or even the Sigil. So I was like a little bit down on this card to where I thought it was like I had a red and a yellow Scar for a Scar in my seal pool. And I was like, oh, great, like perfect. I've got these Go Again cards. And I was like, not a Draconic Chain Link. Kind of awkward sometimes. Not necessarily as good as I thought it was. So I think for me, I think red's like a C plus, and then I think yellow's a C, and blue I think is like a C minus. It's like getting close to filler, I think.
That's very interesting. I thought it was like borderline more impactful than it was in Welcome to Wraith, because in Dromai it satisfies your red claws to get Go Again on your dragons, and then in Fi, I guess it more combos with like some of the other Draconic cards, like Flame Call Awakening lets you go and snatch a Phoenix Flame out of your deck if you played a red. It's like particularly nice there. You can usually lead off your combo chain with it, so yeah, you are committing a card to hand that isn't going to satisfy your Draconic Chain Link clause, but you can still sort of get the Draconic Chain Link cards you need just after Scar for a Scar. It's sometimes a bit of a free roll if you are at lower life. I find in the aggressive decks, the turn cycles tend to go, at least they have for me, they were like, opponents on lower life, I'm on lower life. Opponents on lower life, I'm on lower life. Kind of just trading damage, but obviously that could change with more experience of the set. So I did really like this card. I also didn't mind it in Icelander at red. Obviously it's a bit of a non-vo, but being able to go 4 Go Again into my arcane damage plus the wand seemed okay. It seemed like something I was happy to park in my arsenal that wasn't something like a blue 0 cost, because it does have that, often will have that inherent Go Again, especially when you're starting at lower life. So yeah, I actually have this at a B, mostly at red. I think that the blue and yellows are very meh, but yeah, red Scar for Scar. Yeah, red Scar for Scar is a card that I'd probably first pick that card, to be honest.
Yeah. So we're almost a grade apart, which I'm not upset about. I'm happy that we have some of these disagreements on these cards, because I think it's super interesting. I'm not sure that I would be as keen to first pick this card. Like I say, I think this card is a lot. I just think it's quite a bit weaker than a lot of the Draconic cards that say Go Again on them, because of the fact they're Draconic. And when it comes to, I actually think this card is maybe best in Icelander in the set, and then probably Dromai. And I actually don't love it in Fire. But one thing I was finding playing Fire is like I was defending quite a bit. I felt like my Fire deck was not as explosive as other Fire decks I was playing against, not as aggressive. But I was just defending more and trying to even back parity. And I was finding, I think, less than you were about trading damage. But could, like you say, be pure experience. I guess time will prove maybe one of us right, or both of us
I
right.
only played one mirror, to be fair, so I think that skews my data a bit. I also had a little card called Uprising in my deck, and that card is
must be nice.
Bomb. It's very good. It's a bomb.
Must be nice. All right, where to next?
All right, we're gonna head over to trade in. So this is a generic attack action at common. It's a 0 cost, attacks for 3, defense for 2, and it says at red, of course. When you attack with trade in, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. If trade in is played from Arsenal, it can go again. So Hayden, I actually really like this card. I really like this card, particularly in Fi. I love discarding my Phoenix Flames to this card and then drawing another card. It feels a bit like a free roll. As an Arsenal target that gets go again, I generally don't like cards that are conditional go again based off Arsenal, but trade in, I feel like that other effect is powerful enough, both as a way to filter, but also particularly at the Phoenix Flames. It's nice that for me, I think this card is a B minus. I like having it in my deck, but I think there's definitely a critical maximum to these cards. Like, I don't think you can have too many trade-ins or anything like that. But for a common, I feel like it stands out. But I'm not sold on my grade, Hayden. I'm not sold.
Well, let me talk you down like a like a good barterer. I don't like this card. I don't think it's very good. I think the use case you've talked about in Fi, I think is the best use case for it, right? Is the Phoenix Flame like trade in. I hate that this is in limited in particular. I think in constructed it might be the other way around, but that this is discard a card and then draw a card. I think that's like a real big cost. I think the fact that it's like 2 defense means that you know if you are trying to like set up something else in your arsenal, this card becomes like potentially dead. I think the red is like this reminds me of Frontline Scout, honestly.
Oh, I was gonna say, dude, it's not Frontline Scout at least.
It's not as bad as
I think that effect is significantly better. Frontline Scout getting you pretty much nothing, right? Look at your opponent's hand. I would say the best thing you can compare it to probably is Scour the Battlescape, right? Like it's
sure.
I can't even remember.
I think it's worse than Scour.
Yeah.
So I think for me this is okay filler. I think I'm gonna go C minus on this, D plus at not red. I think like yellow for me in particular, I think it's a D. Like I don't want that card in my deck actively unless it's literally just filler. So yeah, I think I like what you're saying with the Phoenix Flames. I think in Fire it can be somewhat relevant, but you also have to like either draw or activate the ability, and then you're trading the ability for an extra card, which is really nice. Like you come in with 3 chain links, and then you come in with the trade in, and then you ditch back the Phoenix Flame you just got and you turn into a card, and maybe that could be a really good threat, but also you don't know what it could be. So I'm less high on this card. I think it's like B is like putting it in the range of flex and stuff for me, which is I'm nowhere near that.
I feel like anything that requires you to put it in your arsenal in limited is sort of risking being too slow. Plunder on probably transcends that. But still,
maybe.
like something that's only good. Yeah, like you're right, maybe only good if you put it in your arsenal. It's like I don't know. So I'm not really sold on that grade, to be fair.
One day they'll make one of these that defends for 3, and I'll be all on board.
Yeah, yeah. Defense is a big deal. Like things that defend for 3 in this set, huge average defense value.
Utility. It's just utility as well, right? It just means I don't have to commit to put this in my arsenal to try and get value out of it. So
just need that Crown of Providence, baby.
Someone next to me was playing with the Crown of Providence. Good card and limited. Tell you what.
Really? Too bad it sucks and it's constructed.
Yeah, it's bad. Silver Palms. Healing Balm is up next. This is a 0 cost generic non-attack action at common and defense for 2. And we're looking at the yellow one here, and it says gain 2 life, red gain 3, blue gain 1. I like this card at red, and even at yellow, I think it's a reasonable resource card that can potentially just get you something on the end of a chain. I think life is really important in this format. A lot more than I thought it was, and being able to just gain back life and do something that's... But basically, I think defensive abilities are kind of slightly better than they would be in other sets. Like they're like above the threshold of where they would be in other sets for the exact same thing because of the way that Icelander works, because of the way Dromai works, because of the way that Fire works. So all 3 heroes and what they're trying to do, but particularly Icelander with the ability, you don't have Arcane Barrier, you have Quell, you do have some Arcane Barrier, very minimal, right? You do have Quell, and then you do have, I guess, these ways to gain life and prevent damage. But Icelander has like a lot of damage. It's not like an older kind of Arcane Rising wizard decks where it's like, they need to play like a higher density of attacks because, the wizard cards are like not as good, or there's only a couple of ones that you actually want to see. There's a lot with really good effects that reward playing like the ice wizard cards as well that deal damage. So I like red healing balm. I like that I like it particularly in Fire and Dromai. I think just obviously being a red and Dromai to pitch if you need to. Otherwise you just play at the end of a chain after your 8th Ashwings or your dragons or whatever. And then in Fire, same reason, like, pitch, come in with attack, come in with weapon, come in with whatever, Phoenix Flame, and then like healing balm into the chain, like I'm quite into. So I think it's like a C. I think red might even be close to a C plus for me.
Really interesting that we're doing the hidden grades, because I think this card is trash. I think this card is a D, and it's not. I don't think it's particularly close. Like the life gain, like yeah, it's important when your opponent has non-interactive damage, but I still don't. I still don't think that your optimal strategy is going to be sort of gaining life when you're playing against those decks. That being said, you said you like the red and the yellow. The only card that I think I'm really considering playing that is the blue one. And I'm playing it in Icelander as a blue that can go in my arsenal and does at least something and activates my sword, or not my sword, my wand for 3. I think that's fine. Like it's kind of average. But yeah, that's the only one I'm really interested in playing. Anything at like end of the combat chain, like you've had go again, and I'm gonna go play an entire card out of my hand to gain 3 life, or gain particularly. I'm not gonna do it for 2 life. I'm not gonna play the yellow. I'm not sure whether I will sideboard this against Icelander. I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but maybe. You know, I'd rather. You know, obviously, we'd all rather have many things in life, but I would definitely rather have Oasis Respite. But of course, it's the best common of the set, probably. But still, yeah. Healing Balm doesn't do it for me. I'm sure there will be some sort of fatigue deck that is forced at professional events that makes me look like an idiot. But yeah, I don't like Healing Balm. It's a D for me.
I don't even think it's I'd come down a bit on yellow. Maybe it's like a C minus. It's like a filler, and I didn't play my yellow. I didn't need to, but the red one was actively doing a ton of work for me. Like there was multiple times where I set an arsenal over like 2-turn cycles, and then my opponent like quelled me on 1 turn, and then they got no value off the last quell. I just like flipped the red healing bomb, then arsenal my last card, so they couldn't get value off their last quell. Like there's a few times with things like that. The fact that some of the damage I was coming in for was like they could use their 3 block to do something with it, and then play a 2-card hand back at me, and then all of a sudden I just gained 3 life. And the way that the damage is coming in on my opponent's turn with Aether Ashwings and stuff, like I took some damage from Aether Ashwing, and then I came in and cleared a couple, and then played the Healing Balm afterwards to gain back some life. Like the red, I was like quite impressed with. I thought the card was probably going to be bad. I was quite impressed with it, but yeah, my yellow is mostly on theory. I actually didn't play that card. I only played the red, so I could be wrong about the yellow. And then the blue. I mean, if I'm having to flip that out of Arsenal Icelander, like I agree. I don't think that's good. I think that's just whatever, just filler. But yeah, we'll see.
I think this is one of those that I'm going to have to play it more. Just like, yeah, it's very it's peak theory. This is like Sleep Dart. So next we have Sigil of Protection. It's a generic action aura at common, blocks for 2, costs 1, and the red one says ward 4. And then it says, oh, and ward is if your hero would be dealt damage, prevent 3 of that damage and destroy Sigil of Protection. And then it says, at the beginning of your action phase, destroy Sigil of Protection. Oof, Hayden, this is one of those ones that I don't know how I feel about it. I think, maybe playing the red one and stuff against 5, against Dromai, where they can potentially just kind of dink you for something small, and take this away or threaten to take a card or something. Doesn't seem very good. Is it good against Icelander? I'm not sure. I played this in my deck. I played this in my World Premiere deck. And I'm pretty sure it felt underwhelming. I'm pretty sure it felt underwhelming, especially in comparison to something I feel like it's competing with, which is Oasis Respite. But yeah, I would put this at sideboard, I think, and then give it like a C minus.
I really like this card.
Yeah, I figured.
I think this might be like one of the hottest cards against Icelander, red and Dromai in particular. But basically, what I was doing with these, I had 3 of these in my pool, and I was bringing basically all of them in when I went first. So in like the Fire Mirror, I wanted to go second every time. I think that was really important in sealed, but I lost a few die rolls. And then I just sided these in, and on multiple occasions, I played this on turn 1. And my opponent goes to their turn and just sort of goes, wow, that's really good. Like the yellow one in particular, they need to come in with a Draconic card that has go again naturally to start with. So this usually just blanks their whole attack. The fact that, you can, again, I like these cards that you can play, you can do something on the chain, your opponent is utilizing something like Quell, and then all of a sudden you've played a defensive card that gives you utility on their turn, and they've lost value on something like a Quell, I think is really good. But I don't think it's good all the time. So I think this is like particularly bad against Dromai, right? The Aether Ashwings can just kind of take it down. But I think against Icelander, like it's like a really strong premium, I think. So I actually preferred the yellow the most, just I thought, just in terms of what it did, the fact I could still use it as a resource, and in the red, especially in Dromai, I thought was quite good. I'd probably just give this a C, but I think it's a sideboard B in red, particularly into Icelander. But I think it's just kind of just going to be kind of sort of around something that you want in your deck. Maybe it's a C minus, maybe it's a C, but I think this card is better than I gave it credit for, and particularly on the play, I was quite enjoying it in my Fly deck.
What do you think about playing this into Icelander, the context that, you know, that in order to get go again, they're going to need to play, you know, a red line card first. So it potentially soaks up that first attack, at least significantly, just because of the nature of how they get go again. Do you think it's worth in that sense? Because I never played it that way, but now I'm just like thinking about, is it okay against Dromai because of that? Because their first attack is usually kind of a threat?
Oh, against Dromai. Yeah. I think it's potentially reasonable. The problem is if they play something like Rake the Ember Claw or Ember Wing, the one that like turns you, like, bad. Or the one that gives, these ones that are like kind of turning stuff into ash, or maybe they play like the blue attack that turns something into ash, an ash into an ash wing, and you know, like you've got all these things which I think could sort of lead you astray, but in particular into Icelander, I think the card is like actively, I'm happy to have it in the deck, whereas Dromai, less so.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, so we get to the big one for me. I think Oasis Respite. This is a 1-cost generic instant. We're looking at at common. We're looking at the red version here, which says prevent the next 4 damage that would be dealt to target hero this turn by a source of your choice. If they have less life than each other hero, they may gain 1 life. So, of course, in a 1v1 situation, you're generally going to be targeting yourself, and it's saying if you have less life than your opponent. And at yellow, it's prevent 3 damage, and at blue, prevent 2 damage. Common. I really like this card. I think this card is like super, super good in a format where Quell is one of the best mechanics in the set, I think, for limited. The fact that, you know, just a few examples, right? You can pitch a red and Dromai, effectively prevent 4 damage, gain a life if you're lower, and gain an ash. So 2 cards, 5 net damage, I guess, at red and an ash. I'm all in, even at yellow. You know, it still seems reasonable. And then think about, okay, I've pitched a blue, I quell for 2, and then I play Oasis Respite. I could gain 7 damage worth of net across multiple instances of what my opponent's trying to do, especially against Fi or Dromai. So I'm really high on this card. It was like overperforming. I actively wanted this in my deck. I think it does require you having Quell, but I think you're always going to have Quell because I think the equipment is like really high pick and you're going to want it. But even with like the Crown, right? You can pair this for 1 activation off the Crown, your Heliod, and then play this. I think red and yellow, I think red in particular is very good. I think yellow is fine. And I think blue is going to do your job as a resource, and then potentially sometimes play it. But of course, because it doesn't defend, I think it gets worse as it goes down the
probably not playing the blues
orders, so.
myself. Probably not playing the blues myself.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, those block zeros are dangerous. Yeah,
I agree. I think my grade on this though is like B plus. I think Oasis Respite is really strong and a card that I'm in a first pick. I think I want this in basically every deck, and it's going to do a ton of work.
Yep. Well, we've disagreed on a few of them, but not this one. I also think that it's a B, and it's going to be closing in on that B plus range. Obvious, specifically, like if it's in certain situations or against certain heroes, like it's very good. It makes your Icelander matchup interesting. I think that there's just a lot of things to pay resource. Obviously, you mentioned Quell, but there's an attack out of Icelander that makes you discard unless you pay 2. There is like Brother in Arms, which you can defend with, etc., etc. I think this card is very good.
Flicks.
Yep, I think this card is very powerful. But I'm probably playing it in red and yellow. Probably not playing the blues. And I'm not sure how many I'm playing in my deck before, they're specifically sideboarded for Icelander. I'm not sure how many I'm main decking against like a Fi or a Dromai. But yeah, this card is very powerful. I also think that this card is potentially a problem for Class Constructed, but that's a story for another day.
Yep. 5 for 1 is a pretty good return, especially if split when it's life gain. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. But yeah, that's Oasis Respite, and potentially I think maybe the best non-equipment generic in the set. But we will see. All right, let's move on to Draconic Brendan.
Draconic it is. Yep. Sash of Sandakai? Sandakai. Oh, there's an N there. Yeah, Sandakai. Sandakai. Yep. Yeah, so it's a Draconic Equipment chest at common. It has 0 defense, and it says instant. Destroy Sash of Sandakai. Gain 1 resource. Activate this ability only if you played a red card this turn. So, yeah, this card is probably exactly what you want to be doing, both in Dromai and Fi. I think that this is very first pickable. Obviously, it does sort of narrow you into both of those Draconic heroes, but for me, this one's an A. But this is where it gets really hard to grade equipment in Flesh and Blood, because when you see a piece like this, it is the best. This is the best. This is the best chess piece that you could have in the set. I don't know if there's legendaries. I could be blanking. But you want this. Like, you want this card if you're in Draconic. Period, I think. So yeah, for me, It's an A. I think that it will perform very well every time you have it if you're playing Fi or Dramai. Maybe there's a weird archetype that doesn't utilize red cards, but should be good.
I mean, our grades reflect how good equipment is in this game, I think. And yeah, this is a solid A, might even be an A plus for me. I think this card is maybe the best common or rare in the set. Free resources is so good. I think, compare this to something like Hardened Cross Trap or whatever you want to do from previous sets. A Blood Drop Brigade. And then there was a lot more sort of nuance to Blood Drop Brigade. Like this is doing so much work for me. And I think the reason that this is doing so much work is, like I say, this is a really resource intensive format, although sometimes it doesn't look like it. But just paired with the fact you want to play reds, the fact that you have all these defensive abilities, to be able to do something like quelling your opponent's turn and then all of a sudden still have a fire hand that requires a resource to play, like a 1-for-4 or something, or a 1-for-5, that sort of thing. Sash or Sandakai can do that for you. So also turns things like some of the 2 costs that are a little bit more awkward, and maybe something like fire because you want to swing your weapon. Because if you're using only 1 blue, you can't play both of those, right? But with Sash, that allows you to put that output there. So yeah, this card was super impressive to me. And I felt like every time my opponents flipped it up in their sort of Draconic decks versus if they didn't, it was like quite a big difference.
Yeah, and it keeps you open-ish as well. You have 2 heroes to choose from. The wizard one, the wizard chest that gains your resource on your opponent's turn, very powerful. Also an A in my opinion. We'll get there, but it does pigeonhole you a bit more when you're drafting. So
yep,
definitely.
Yeah, very true. Right, it's the openness. But in saying that, like this is where the draft is going to be really interesting because you have just Icelander being by itself and then the 2 Draconic heroes. So where do you split it and what are people going after? Anyway, let's move on. We've got Red Hot next, which is a Draconic action attack action at rare. It is a Dramai or Fi specialization, and has Rupture. If Red Hot is played as Chain Link 4 or higher, it has. So this is our first time reading Rupture. And specifically with Red Hot, it has when you attack with this, reveal the top X cards of your deck. X is the number of Draconic chain links you control. Deal damage equal to the number of red cards revealed this way to any target, and then shuffle your deck afterwards. So hit those allies, hit the opponent for more damage, and it comes in for 4 attack and 3 defense. And I think I already said this, but it costs 2 Red Hot. So the ability to kill 2 dragons on the end of your chain seems pretty good. Maybe come in for 7 or 8 damage total. Seems pretty good. The Rupture cards to me are super interesting. I think it's a lot easier to turn on Rupture in both Fire and Dromai than I thought. Fire in particular, but Dromai as well, especially I think in draft with the right decks. And I think people's Dromai decks weren't built correctly and people were kind of misunderstanding what they should be doing with those decks. They're a bit more sort of mid-rangey defensive as opposed to like put in all the big Phantasm attacks and just try and make as many dragons as possible and Ashwings as possible quickly. Like it's a bit more strategic than then you're trying to find these kind of like spike turns where it's like, okay, I'm converted multiple Ash, or I on my turn presented a bunch of damage they had to do and then made some threats that they then can't deal with, and then I make some more threats. That's when you can start to like get these long chain links. And Red Hot I think is maybe the best of those just in terms of what it can do. I mean, the ability to like kill 2 dragons or just push undefendable damage apart from outside of Quell seems really good to me. So I think this is like a B plus for me. I think this is like the kind of payoff I want in Rupture. And otherwise at a 2 cost for a 4, a defend 3 is like kind of whatever, but all the Rupture cards are kind of whatever. But I do if they're not turned on, but I think that's worth considering.
So there's one Rupture card that I think is not whatever, but we'll get to it.
Oh, the 1 for 5?
The 0 for what is it? Lava Burst or whatever.
Sure.
I think that card's good. Anyway, Red Hot, I think the effect is good. I think that 2 cost is really expensive, particularly in Fi. So for me, it's just a C+. I think that, getting its ability is reasonable. So like Rupture is a reasonable ability to get. Getting Rupture while you have 2 resources floating, that's something else. So for me, Red Hot is a C+.
Yeah, I think that's actually what's holding it back from me calling it an A, to be honest.
Yeah.
This reminds me of a card like Soul Reaping.
Yeah.
Yeah, this reminds me of a card like Soul Reaping, but it's a lot harder to get off. But yeah, I think it's going to be basically we're arguing on like how big the drawback is of the 2 cost and being able to trigger Rupture. I think that's where like a card like Sash of Sandakai is really important. But when I saw this get off, and I saw it, be pulled off quite a lot of times at the World Premiere, it was super strong. Although I will agree with you, like 2 cost is not easy, and it's easier to do in Fire, I think, and Sash is really key. So yeah, I can see that. I could come down to like a B, but I think I'll probably stick with my B+.
Mm-hmm. So next we have Rise Up. It's a Draconic attack action at rare. It's 1 cost. The red attacks for 3 and defense for 3 as well. It's also a Dramai or Fi specialization. It has Rupture, and it says if Rise Up was played as Chain Link 4 or higher, it has Dominate and plus X, where X is twice the number of Phoenix Flames you control. Yeah, so I haven't had any chance to play with this card. I'm not sure. So getting 2 Phoenix Flames on a combat chain seems like something that's a bit less common than just one. So evaluating it 1 to 1 for 5, defense for 3. Yeah, definitely a little bit. So for me, it's just a C. I'm actually not really over the moon on this one. I think it's okay. The dominate, is dominate good enough? I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that crazy. I don't think dominate adds much for me on this card.
Yeah. I had this in my pool. I wasn't impressed with it. I actually cut it into Icelander in favor of like sigils and stuff like that. It was like the card. I was like, yeah, I'm not that impressed with this card. The Dominator is like kind of whatever, and the fact that, like you say, it's like I need 2 Phoenix Flames. It's not actually that crazy. Like getting 2 Phoenix Flames on the chain is not that hard, especially if you're setting it up. But then you're coming in for 7, dominate for 1. Like that is a really good return. But you're having to do a lot of setup and a lot of things maybe that you wouldn't optimally want to do just to get to that. So yeah, I think it's like a C plus. Maybe it's a B minus in the right deck for me, but I'm not as keen on this one as I am on other ones. It's interesting because a lot of the other rupture effects aren't quite as good as this, but they're a lot easier to like. They don't have the. It's like the secondary condition. Like this and Red Hot and a few others have these like double conditions where it's like you have to do X and also X. So I have to have Phoenix Flames and I have to have Rupture, or I have to be able to have 2 resources and have Rupture. Although I think Red Hot is maybe better. I think Red Hot's better than this card. And then there's a few that's like you have to hit and also have Rupture. So
yeah. For me, that one's a C. All right.
Yeah. Next up is Blaze Headlong. So this is another Draconic attack action. Costs 0, defends 2, and attacks for 4. Of course, all Draconic cards are red. If you have played another red card this turn, Blaze Headlong has Go Again. I mean, in the decks that can play this card, it's just a better Scarf for Scar, I think. And the argument might be, well, Scarf for Scar, you play first on the chain. Okay, but that doesn't turn on your Draconic anyway. So you're going to always need these Draconic cards that have natural Go Again. This is not one of those, but then it's just a 0 for 4. And that's a really good return. So this is a C plus for me.
I had a B plus. I think this card is so gas. God, I want this card most of the games I'm playing. So there's like a balance in 5, right? It's 5 specifically where you want cards that have inherent Go Again, and then you have like a few that have conditional Go Again, right? Whether it's the number of chain links, but this one just being you have to have played a red before. That seems pretty reasonable for me, and a 0 for 4 is something that I would love to be playing after my first attack action for that combat chain. So I think this card is really, really powerful. Like B plus, like in Phi, like I want a bunch of these. Obviously not too many because they're a bit of a non-bow with as you get more and more of them. But yeah, this is a B plus. I could come down to a B, but I probably won't for now.
Do you think this is better than all of the generics?
All of the generics. No, there's one more that I think.
I mean, that's what your current grade is, right? Like a B plus is like better than Oasis, better than Brothers in Arms, better than Flex.
So I'm pretty sure I gave B pluses to most of those, including Scar for a Scar. Maybe I wasn't as high on like Brother in Arms or something. I don't know. I think I was. So yeah, I think it's on par. That's the only way I could come down to a B, I think, or around that range, is because in comparison to other generics in the set, it's it's on par, but very powerful card. This is the generic I'm picking pretty Draconic that I'm picking pretty high.
Okay. Yeah, I think like I'm interested to talk through some of the next slots of Draconic cards because I think this is fine. I think this is kind of middle of the pack when it comes to Draconic cards, but I think there's so many more powerful cards, and I think I'm rating pure damage less than you are. I think like even just talk about like Scar for Scar and then this. Yeah, I don't know. Defense for 2 doesn't have like an on-hit effect. Like a B plus for me is like a snatch, and I guess this can have Go Again. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. I think I'm going to stick on a C plus. I'm not as high on. I think Go Again's a lot easier to come by. I think pure damage is good, but the on hit effects I think are like where I really want to be if I'm trying to draw stuff. Or yeah, I think I'll stick C plus.
Yeah, it just has the on hit effect of reducing the opponent's life total to 0. So
classic. It's a classic one.
All right. So next up we have Breaking Point. This is Draconic attack action at common. At red here, it costs 1, attacks for 5, and blocks for 3, and has Rupture. It says if Breaking Point is played as Chain Link 4 or higher, when this hits a hero, destroy all cards in their arsenal. Yeah, I think this card is very good. To be honest, I played this card.
1 for 5 at minimum.
Yeah, 1 for 5 at the minimum, and the Rupture effect is.
I think 3.
Yeah, the Rupture effect is very significant. You do have to get Rupture. If you don't, I guess it is a 1 for 5 is okay. The blocks are 3. So I think that this card is a B for me, and this is one of those cards that might bring my Blazing Hedgehog, or Blazing Headlong, as I like to say, down to a B, sort of on that par. But yeah, this card is powerful at common too, which is crazy. It really feels like a rare. I don't know if you get that sense too, but this card really feels like a rare, but is that common here?
Yeah, man, it has like at base it's a red critical strike, right? It's the same as that generic, but also it's draconic and it has a rupture effect. And the rupture effect is it is good. It is not as good as I thought it was going to be when I had this in my pool. In terms of I was like, oh man, this like what, like a mini Command and Conquer. But of course, Iceland is looking to play out of Arsenal all the time. Even Drone Might to an extent, and because the cards like Oasis Respite and some of these things you want to do instant speed, it was like maybe not quite as good as I thought it was, but still very good. I think it's just it's a better critical strike, right? And this is the kind of thing I want to be doing, because even if I'm not getting Rupture, I'm coming in for 5. But when I get Rupture, I'm coming for 5 with a really relevant on-hit effect, and I don't have to do anything else other than Rupture and then present this on-hit effect with good breakpoint. So yeah, I had this like a B-. I think I'm like slightly down still on some of these cards. I think these cards are good, but there's only so many you can fit into your deck. But I do think this is better than like the Blazing Headlong for me personally. Just the on-hit effect and the stats. 1 for 5 and 3. As opposed to 0, 4, and 2. I quite like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we've got Burn Away. So Burn Away is another Draconic attack action, 0 cost, attacks for 2, defense for 3, and says, as an additional cost to play Burn Away, you may banish a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard. When you do, Burn Away gains +2 and go again. This card is decent upside because it defends for 3. But otherwise, I think it's fairly average. Like, it's a big cost to effectively banish and lose one of those Phoenix Flames for the rest of the game. So I only really want to see this late. Yes, it's good that because it can start a chain at a pinch if you need it to. So I think if you're really low on like chain link starters, Draconic chain link starters, you might have to play Burn Away. But I really want to limit how many of these in my deck, and often I really don't want to play it. This is like a C minus for me, honestly. I think a 2 for 0 defense 3 that has conditional go again and costs you a lot to get that go again. Like, those Phoenix Flames are so important. I'm not really that keen on having this card.
C for me as well.
Could be wrong.
Yeah, I feel like you don't want to see it early. I feel like it's not worth the banish on like the really, really early turns.
I agree.
And I don't find myself circling back around to my pitch cards super often when I'm playing Fight, at least in sealed, but that could turn around as strategies turn around as well. So I'm not super keen to pitch this card either. And I don't want to play it early, so I kind of just got to draw it later. So yeah, that's a C for me at best. All right, so next we have Flameborn Retribution, a Draconic attack action at common. It costs 1, attacks for 3, and defends for 2. And it says when you defend with Flameborn Retribution, if you've been dealt damage this turn, you may return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. Ooh, I don't know. I haven't played with it. I don't know. It seems, it does seem kind of whatever. I'm not gonna lie, it does seem kind of whatever. It replacing a card in your hand, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, replacing itself as a pitch card, I guess. Getting a Phoenix Flame. I have it as a C. Honestly, Hayden, I don't know on this one. I have it as a C. Well, I haven't been able to play with it very much.
Break it down, right? At minimum, it does kind of one of the things that you really need to do, which is like start the chain with the Draconic card. It's 1 for 3 with go again. Not a good rate of return, right? 1 for 3. But it does also have this defensive ability where maybe you don't need it to start a chain and you can trade them for effectively 3 damage, right? Defend for 2, get back a Phoenix Flame if you couldn't otherwise have, or you have multiple Phoenix Flames. I think this is a C. This is just like a role player. Like, you're going to play this in a lot of your decks when you draft it because it does a job that you need it to do. And then other times you're not, because your deck's going to be a higher quality and you're not going to take it high. So yeah, I think this card is fine, but it's just like a kind of solid C. So super solid C probably.
I think, yeah, I just feel like it could be a bit better than I'm giving it credit for. Just like replacing that card, blocking for 2, like, yeah, I'm just not sure on that one, but I'm gonna sit with you at C. But I'm very
really replacing the card though, right? Like, it's replacing part of the card, so it replaces a chain link, which could be really relevant for getting back another Phoenix Flame. So it could be worth 2 damage. So it could be worth 4 net damage, right? 2 on defense and 2 because of 2 Phoenix Flames, like 1 back with the self and then 1 back because you have the Phoenix Flame. And then also in a pinch, it starts a chain link when you need it, like a combat chain when you need it to for your Draconic chain links. But yeah, I mean, like, maybe it's a C+, but like this card overall, I was kind of like, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. It just feels like the kind of role player to me. It's like a super solid C. Right, Flame Call Awakening, something that I don't think is a role player. This is a 1-cost Draconic attack action. Attacks for 3, defense for 2, and says, when you attack with Flame Call Awakening, if you've played another red card this turn, you may search your deck for a Phoenix Flame, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, and it has go again. So compare it to the last card we looked at, right?
Yes.
Starts a chain as you need it to, still defense for 2, but it's going to go and find you one of the most important cards in your deck when you're playing Fi, and even for some builds playing Dramai and the Phoenix Flame, getting that second Phoenix Flame into your graveyard as a Fi is really important, I think. So this is one of the best ways to do it. So yeah, I think for me, being a thing that starts a chain link has, it's minimum worth 4 damage, right? So 1 for 4, because getting the Phoenix Flame plus all the upside that could potentially give you. I think this is like a B minus, maybe even a B for me.
Yeah, so I feel like you're often not starting the chain link with this because you'd have had to play like a non-attack.
Right. You can start the chain link with it if you don't want to get the ability. Yep,
but
you're right.
Yes, specifically talking about the card that preceded this, a Phoenix Flame out of deck versus a Phoenix Flame out of graveyard are infinitely different. Just saturating that graveyard with Phoenix Flames, and obviously going up to search a card. I think this card is very good. I'm also kind of wondering like how average it is, and I might be above on it. I do think the effect is powerful, but needing something to come before it. It can be a non-attack action though. It says if you played another red card, that's different, right?
Can be.
Doesn't have to be a red on the combat chain or anything like that. I think it's good. I had it as a B minus, but I could see it being a C plus, to be honest. That being said, I could also see it being a straight up B. So I'm a fan of this card. I played it. I would like to have a few of these in my Fi deck, to be honest. Haven't played it in Dramai, but yeah, powerful card. Does block for 2. That is a downside.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. I think it's like close in power level to Headlong for me. I think I really like the utility of these things, and I think the earlier you play this, the better. I think like this is like higher value at the start when you get to that second Phoenix Flame really early in fire, but can drop off. So I think you're right. It's like C plus B minus. Maybe I'm coming down a little bit as well, but it's pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So next we have Inflame, which is a Draconic attack action at common. It attacks for 1, blocks for 2. It costs 0. It says when you attack with Inflame, if you've played another red card this turn, you may return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. Go again. I didn't really like this card, Hayden. Just attacks for 1 is at red as well. It does also block for 2, and it's just pointing the Phoenix Flame out of your graveyard. So it kind of feels like you need to have 2 Phoenix Flames in your graveyard for this to be good, because you want to also activate Fi on that turn. Yeah, I think that this is a C minus for me, Hayden. It could even be lower. I actually tried playing it too, and I was like, it felt as underwhelming as I expected it to.
This is really low grade filler for me. Like pure, like not even a role player. This is like C minus, maybe D plus. Like I really don't like this card. I might even just give it a D plus just to try and dissuade people from putting it in their deck, because it is quite bad. It's really use case oriented, like you say. It only gets good once you have 2 Phoenix Flames, and it's only like this is a Rupture enabler. So I think this is the sort of card if you're building like a really heavy Rupture deck, like this is the kind of thing you are going to want for sure, because of what it does in terms of the ability to basically potentially to be 2 chain links, to create 2 chain links for you. So in Rupture, if you think about, okay, I've got a pitch card, I've got my Rupture card, and then I've got another attack, or maybe just my weapon, and then I have this. Well, I can get to 4, right? Because you go. Actually, this doesn't work because you need a card to play first to turn on the Inflame. So like, yeah, it's really average, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was trying to build a use case that I thought was really good for it, but it's still even, because even if you go like, okay, red attack that has go again into your Phoenix Flame, you go back with it into your Rupture. It's not even like the best use of your resources. Like you'd rather use your weapon in there somewhere. So yeah, I'm not as hot on it. Although maybe with red hot, it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have Lava Burst, which is another Draconic attack action. Defense for 3, attacks for 2, and costs 0. It has Rupture. If Lava Burst is played as Chainlink 4 or higher, it has +3 attack. Interesting, because I know you just talked about this card before. I think this is a fine Rupture payoff. I think 0 cost Rupture is like really good, because it allows you to go 1 cost plus weapon. I think that's kind of the upside this card has. But the ceiling of this card is 5 damage for 0, as opposed to 5 damage for 1 with a bunch of other cards. So like Critical Strike or the Mini Command and Conquer we talked about before. So I'm like, I think this card's fine. I think at its floor, it's kind of bad. 0 for 2, does nothing else. So I'm gonna give this like a C, maybe a build around B minus at best, but I think this is like kind of filler. I think this might even be a C minus in most decks, to be honest.
That's crazy. Yeah, I love this card. I think this card is so good. But in Fi, I haven't played it in July.
Damage. Again, damage, right? You
well,
love the damage.
There's such a like 0 for 5 is just so good in Fi. Like the thing is like it's so, there's a contextual aspect to this where it's like how many resources is Hayden playing his deck versus how many am I? Because then 0 for 5 is of a different value, right? Where you have a potential 1 for 5 as well that you could play that has an effect. So yeah, I think that in like a lean Fi deck, I want these like bad, and I want to be arsenaling them, and I think they're very, very effective on the end of a chain link. 0 for 2, you're right, not very good, but blocks for 3, I feel like that's good enough for me. Yeah, I have this at like a B to B plus. I don't want many of them, but I love it. I actually love this card. I think it's incredibly powerful. Just finishing that chain link with 5, it being 0 cost. I'm pretty 2 cost averse in the Fi deck. I'm pretty 2 cost averse. You're also playing against things like Icelander, which give you frostbites, and yeah, I find that something like 0 for 5 gets me much more excited.
I think where I'm coming from is that getting these like ruptures is a bit easier than I thought, but it depends on the matchup, and it's not always like guaranteed. And then like 0 for 5. So I guess where I'm coming from with like my resource base is that I think the weapon is really strong.
Yes.
So I think 1 costs particularly quite good as well, because at least you utilize your resource bases. But what I like from my 0 cost is I really like these 0 cost chain starters. We're going to talk about some of these that are coming up soon, and particularly in Fire, there's ninja cards that do this, Draconic Ninja cards. So like having this 0 cost is pretty good, I think. But also I think the 1 cost ones are really strong as well. So yeah, I think this card is fine. Like I'm going to play it in a lot of decks, but like its floor is quite low, like 0 for 2, even though it does defend for 3. Like that is quite a low floor, I think. So, and then I don't think its ceiling is that high. Like I think this just kind of plays in the middle ground. And I think it's hard to kind of say that this is going to be a B in most decks. But yeah, I might stretch to a C plus maybe, but I do think there's better cards at C plus that I've kind of already given.
Yeah, so I sort of evaluate this as like kind of a 1 cost in a sense, right? Because a lot of times I find like an effective line, the one that I really like is like a 3-card hand, right? You pitch a blue, or you come in with a 0 cost attack to start. Then you pitch a blue, you attack with the weapon, then you activate 5 for 1 resource, you get your Phoenix Flame, and then you lava burst them. It's like disgusting value for 3 cards, in my opinion. So like that's what I really like about this. Also, if you have Uprising in your deck, lava burst pretty good because you'll be going wide. But yeah, I think that like that specifically, especially if you're playing any sort of like mid-rangey game where you're planning on blocking a bit, you're planning on interacting with your opponent, I think like that 3-card hand in particular is very reasonable. Like it's very doable. You can do it often, especially if you arsenal the lava burst. And yeah, I think it's just powerful. I think 0 for 5 is very good.
Yeah, it's just blown my mind that you've got this higher than something like Red Hot. I just think that card has like got such a high payoff, and I think
could just have less blues than you in my seal deck, right? But Red Hot.
It's just a question. How many blues are you playing in your Fire deck?
Probably not. I mean, ideally, do I have to play? The question is like, question comes about yellows too. But let's say like probably 8 to 10. Play 8 to 10.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I was around like 7 to 8.
Yeah, reasonable.
I think 10's a lot. That's like a third of your deck, right?
It is a lot. I think 8 is probably what I would shoot for, and then maybe in a draft where I didn't get to pick my blues, maybe I got a little bit more cut off than I expected in pack 3 or something, or other people had the same strategy where they're picking me blues in pack 3, which we get into that whole thing. Maybe I end up with 6. I'd probably be okay.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. So next up is Searing Touch. Is Draconic attack action at common. It attacks for 3, defense for 3, and it costs 1. It says Rupture. If Searing Touch is played as Chain Link 4 or higher, when you attack with this, deal 2 damage to any target. So 1 for 5, but you can hit another target. So that's going to be effective against Drama. Other than that, I think it's just kind of bad. Probably just seems strictly worse than Breaking Point as well. I found if you're playing Fi, this card, like, it doesn't feel like you're really stretched to kill a lot of dragons, especially the lower health dragons. I feel like the bigger health dragons, the invocations, those are where you really struggle. But clearing like Aether Ashwing seems pretty reasonable. So for me, I have this as a C, and I probably even will go down to like a C minus.
I think this card's good. I think this is like comparable to Lava Burst for me, maybe slightly better. This is so interesting, our kind of evaluation of these cards. I think like being a 1 cost is like I said, it's resource intensive format. Like it definitely does count for something, but the ability to split that damage I think is pretty good. And like you say, yeah, you can clear Aether Ashwings. I think it is harder to clear some of the dragons. Also, this is just your pure damage, which is sometimes really hard to deal with. One of the downsides is they can like quell this for value. So I have this at like a C. I think it's like you say, it's not as good as the five power attack, but I think it's kind of on par with Lava Burst level. It's like you're gonna have it in your deck. It's a reasonable rupture payoff. You got to be careful about how many of these you have because at a base level, just as an attack, it's like you say, it's pretty bad. But hey, Brendan, so is Lava Burst. So.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Stoke the Flames. This is a 1 cost for 4 attack, 3 defense that says when Stoke, again, Draconic attack action. We're still on the Draconic attacks. When Stoke the Flame hits, you may return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. If you do, Stoke the Flames gets Go Again. I'm really not keen on conditional Go Again in a set where I think there's a lot of ways to get good Go Again. I think this actually, yeah, I mean, like we said before, right? A Phoenix Flame in a graveyard is pretty reasonable. It's good value, but the fact you have to hit to be able to do it, and then also you have to hit to even just continue the chain link on to get Go Again. I think where this card is actually at its best is like at the end of a chain link to either say be like, okay, I have a card in hand, and then I play Stoke the Flames, and it's like my opponent can defend it out, like with 2 cards, or maybe they've got the resource from Quell, which is another reason I'm kind of down on this card. And then I just get to Arsenal my other threat and move on. Otherwise, I get a Phoenix Flame back. Maybe I get to play my other threat plus a Phoenix Flame, return another Phoenix Flame, or I just play the Phoenix Flame for a damage Arsenal threat, or I play the threat Arsenal Phoenix Flame. So lots of different ways about it. But I think this is just like a C. Like I think you are going to play this card a lot of the time, but it is not something that I'm particularly getting or taking high because I think it can kind of like ruin your hands. But a defense for 3 and it's a 4 for 1, so it's reasonable.
Yeah, I think this card is pretty reasonable. I'm not gonna give it a crazy grade or anything like that, but in Vi, like it feels effectively like a 1 for 5. I only play it. You only really play it at the end of the combat chain, I think, right? Or if you're in a mirror or something and the opponent is not blocking, trying to have a pivot turn, I guess it's okay in the middle of the combat chain there. But yeah, at the end of the combat chain, effectively functioning as 1 for 5, or maybe you can stick that Phoenix Flame in Arsenal, if that's what you do. I think it's pretty reasonable. I just have it as a C+, but I could go down to C. But I just, at the end of a combat chain, I like it, right? And obviously, if you have something like a lava burst or something like that in Arsenal, and you're playing this at the end of the combat chain because maybe you don't have rupture, then it can be quite powerful if the opponent really doesn't interact with you there. But outside of that use case, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, 1 for 4s I don't think ever terrible, right? Like it's especially if you're able to use like it works well with the weapon, right? Like 0 cost.
Yeah.
Maybe weapon, Phoenix Flame, whatever, roll into this. Like there is use cases for it, but yeah, I think it's just like a role play.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, Brendan, what's the last card?
So we got the Phoenix Flame. Yep. So we got Phoenix Flame here. The only thing we gotta say is play all 3 of them. If you're playing 5, if you're playing Dramai, I've seen people play 1 because of the draconic attacks, things like Flame Call Awakening, going to fetch. I think that's a reasonable choice. Like I think that's probably a good idea. I haven't done it myself yet, so I can't give you the final verdict. But play 1 if you have a way to grab it or interact with it. I wouldn't just play 1 in my Dramai deck. In Fi, you play all 3. Period. I don't think there's gonna be a use case where you play less than 3 in Fi.
Yeah, no, my game 1 of the Uprising World Premiere, I had 2, and then immediately realized that I definitely should have been playing all 3, basically on turn 1. So yeah, play all 3 and fine. Basically every situation. I can't really see any situation where you think where 2 is going to be correct just based on the number of cards that care about Phoenix Flames and your hero ability. Getting that second one in graveyard as soon as possible, getting it as soon as possible is really key. And then Dramai, yeah, I think it's like a 0 to 1, right? Like there is decks that are probably going to play none, but Rupture is still Draconic. It's still relevant, and there are, like you say, there's cards that can get it, cards that can get it back. But drawing in hand is often going to be pretty poor in Dramai, so you do need to weigh that up. But yeah, Phoenix Flame. And also, have you seen the full art Phoenix Flame? That looks awesome.
It's beautiful. I mean, just on that point, like Legend Stories did an amazing job with making like packs fun and interesting and exciting to open in the set. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah. All right, Brendan, it's the first of our heroes. We've got Dromai as we move into the Draconic Illusionist cards, and Dromai says, whenever you pitch a red card, create an Ash token. If you've played a red card this turn, dragons you control have Go Again while attacking. So 4 intellect, 20 health, of course, Dromai. And Ash. I'm going to read Ash for the first time. and the one-time. Ash is a Draconic Illusionist token. Ash material. While Ash is under an object, that object has Phantasm. So Phantasm says, when this is defended by a non-illusionist attack action card with 6 or more attack, destroy this and close the combat chain. So that's what Ash does. Thoughts on Dramai? I mean, I guess one of the just some like keynotes on Dramai, like pitching reds on the opponent's turn is how you can get some good value off of cards. We talked about Oasis Respite before, how you can pitch that paying red, get an Ash, etc. There's good play patterns with Dramai that sort of I think are gonna evolve as we move on with this hero. I think it's the hardest of the heroes to like build and even play because it's sometimes you can just kind of be like, oh, I need to like have all these reds and then pitch reds to play reds and be really resource inefficient. And I think there's a real balance to this deck in terms of, this hero, in terms of like the resources you play and when you utilize your resources.
Yep, I think it's the hardest hero to make work in sealed. Yeah, so Dramai, is it good though? Yes, I think it's so good. I think a lot of people are kind of down on it right now after the world premiere. I just think it's a bit more complicated than the other heroes, which is surprising because we have Wizard in the set. But there's just a fine balance between the cards you're playing, your resource cards, generating Ash, converting that Ash to Aether Ashwings, and then the dragons as well. And some of them are very good. We'll get into that, but some of them are okay, and some of them are like, oh god, how am I going to deal with this? So, yeah, I think Dramai is powerful. Hard to make work in sealed, but if you have the right pool, go for it. In draft, to be honest, I don't know. I didn't play against any in draft, and it seems like a deck that's probably, that's where it's going to shine. If it's going to shine anywhere, it's not in sealed, it's going to be a draft, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of our testing partners, Damakai, he had a pretty nutty Dramai draft deck in the draft that I did. I played the mirror against him, and there's a particular dragon that's very good in the mirror, which Dan had and was crushing me. So yeah, Dramai, very interesting.
All right.
All right, Brendan, do you want to take us through? I'll just quickly read the weapon as well if you haven't seen Storm of Sandakai. It is a Draconic Illusionist weapon, 2-hander, and it says dragon allies you control have once per turn, action, 0, attack. And of course, just because the reminder text, allies can be attacked and can't be defended by the controlling hero. All right, Brendan, what's first up in terms of our Draconic Illusionist cards?
Yeah, so it's going to be Silken Form, which is Draconic Illusionist equipment arms. It's at common. It blocks for 0. It says instant, destroy Silken Form, transform target Ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. And then it has Quell 1 on it. So just quickly, let's just talk about what an Aether Ashwing is. So an Aether Ashwing is a token. You use your Ash to convert to an Aether Ashwing, and it has 1 attack and 1 health. It's an ally, and it has Arcane Barrier 1 on it as well.
And importantly, it's a dragon.
Yes, it is a dragon.
Dragon.
So this armor is pretty interesting because I don't think it competes with too much, but still I would put it at a B+. I don't think it's quite there at the Sandiki, or I forget the name, or any of those like really impactful pieces of armor. I just think that like I want this if I'm playing Dramai, and it's just good, right? Quell 1 is good, but also instant turning something into an Aether Ashwing seems quite powerful. So B+.
Yeah, I mean, the coolest thing about this is that you can use Quell, and then because Quell means that it gets destroyed at the end of the end phase, you can also use the instant ability to turn an Ash into an Aether Ashwing. So it's not just one or the other like some of the others. This is both. So Silken Form is really good. I think it's a defensive card that then turns something into a threat. So you can actually go, Quell on your turn, and then they play the last attack, and then they target you as the hero, and then you flip the Quell. Flip this after you've quelled the attack or something, get the Aether Ashwing, and then have the threat on your turn. I think this is a B+. It might even be an A- to me. I think this is one of the strongest equipment. I don't think it's as strong as the Sash or the Wizard chest that we're going to get to, but I think it's better than something. I'm gonna give this an A-. I had a B+. I think just the ability to do both, create a threat and be defensive, is really strong.
Yeah, I could get behind that. Next
up, we've got Invoke Asvalai. So Asvalai is so it's a double-sided card. It's the first of our double-sided cards. The Invoke on one side, and then the Draconic Illusionist Dragon Ally on the other side. So Asvalai, Invoke Asvalai says invocations resolve flipped as an ally in the arena, which we're going to talk about, and it has transformed target Ash you control into Asvalai. Go again, and it defends for 3, and it costs 0. So our first dragon, our first invocation, and it costs 0. And Asvalai says, whenever Asvalai attacks, you may have him deal 1 arcane damage to up to any 2 targets, and it has 2 attack and 3 defense, and it's a Draconic Illusionist Dragon Ally. This one is very good, and it's very, very good in the mirror. Come in for 2 and kill 2 Aether Ashwings, or ping off 1 damage onto 2 different dragons and then kill them off. It's the mirror breaker. This is what our good friend Dan Mackay was crushing me with in our draft that we did. And the fact that it's zero cost, I think invocations are really strong because you can literally just play this off a 1 card hand, have the ability and come in with it because it triggers the go again. It satisfies that condition on the weapon, and then of course you have the dragon. So I think this is B plus, maybe. Yeah, I think it's a B plus, and I think against Droma it's like an A plus in the mirror.
Yep, agree. That's what I had. It's very powerful. So effectively, you're getting 0 for 4 pretty often, which is good. The 3 defense, yeah, it could have higher defense, but still good enough. And like you said, you're able to play this and swing with it. It's a very good card. So yeah, I'm going to be actively drafting this pretty early if I'm in Dromai. All right, so next up we have Invoke Chromai. This is another 0 cost. What do we call these? Invocation. At rare, it blocks for 3 and it says transform Ashen Control into Chromai. Go again. So once per turn, when Chromai attacks or leaves the arena, gain 1 action point. It has 3 attack and 2 life. I don't know if we said it, but this is at rare. Yeah, so this is actually one I'm not too sure on. I think I might put it at like B plus just because or not B plus, sorry, B minus, because I feel like the 0 cost dragons are just very effective. It's once per turn when it attacks or it leaves the arena, gaining an action point. Yeah, it's good. I don't know if it's great, so I think insulating you against those poppers too is decent. But yeah, for me it's a B minus. It's a really good dragon, but its text there isn't the reason it particularly stands out to me.
Yeah, all these things cost a card, right? Which is relevant, but they're also really good threats, and they're onboard threats, like Brendan's favorite term, sticky weapon. That they've got to deal with. But the really good thing about these 0 costs is, like I said before, is you can play them off 1 card hands. They're super resource efficient, especially if you're trying to pitch reds to gain ash to do other things as well. A 0 cost can have a lot of value. And then, like you said, yeah, popper insulation. So if they do defend it with a 6 attack, you still get your action point back. But also, I guess the cool thing is that it gives you that protection for the full turn as well. If they want to try and defend something else, or when it attacks, it still gets an action point, so they can't then pop a bigger attack and get the value out of it. So that's quite nice. And then there is things that don't have go again. There's like is it called dust up? I think there's one that, like, when it hits, turn an ash into an ash ring, but it doesn't have go again by itself, so it makes that card more playable. Where I think that card is maybe not as good. So yeah, I'm on board. B minus. I think it's not as good as some of the others, but it's still very strong, and 0 cost is good. Next up, we've got Invoke Kyloria, and so these all have the same text in terms of transform target ash into the said dragon. This one costs 1, defense for 3, and Kyloria says attack 4, health 2. Again, Draconic Illusionist dragon ally. When Kyloria hits a hero, gain control of an item they control. If you don't gain control of an item this way, draw a card. This is Snatch on a stick.
Yes, this is Snatch, but it's a permanent. I think this is like it's maybe an A minus, but it's also maybe an A. Like, what are they gonna do? Let this sit on the board on their following turn? No, you can also play it and then swing with it on your turn, so it's effectively a Snatch, but I guess for 1. Yeah, this card is ridiculous. The opponent literally has to kill this on the next turn. You cannot let this sit on the board. It is way too powerful. Yeah, I think for this one's an A for me.
Yeah, I think it's an A minus for me. I think it doesn't quite reach the A, and I think the reason for that is just, again, it's a 1 cost as 2 health. Yes, they have to deal with it, but they can pretty easily deal with it at 2 health. But the first turn you come in with it, it's going to draw 2 cards, right, and then force them to spend a 3rd card to kill it. So that's a lot of value. 2 cards for 3 cards, really good trade. And then if you've got other threats on the board, maybe it's protecting another dragon that they have to kill this one, and now all of a sudden you get to keep around your Chromai or your T-Mai or whatever it might be, these other dragons. So yeah, I think this is like an A minus for me, but yeah, the card is super good. I know Dan, Dan had this one as well. He had all the dragons.
I pulled the Marvel of this in the world premiere. Nice. So next we have Invoke. Is it Mirror Guy?
Mirror Guy, yeah.
Yeah. So one resource, 3 defense, and once you transform it, it has 2 attack, 4 life, and it says your first dragon attack each turn loses and can't gain Phantasm. By the way, this is a rare. So Hayden, I actually think that this effect is not particularly important in limited, especially in sealed, because there's significantly less poppers. You also have less things that have Phantasm. Obviously, the dragons do. I have it as a C+. I don't think it's particularly incredible. I think it's more of a constructed card than anything. It also costs 1. Remember, it costs 1. It has the 4 life. Yes, that is annoying. 4 life is annoying. but only swinging for 2. Maybe if your deck is like grinding the opponent out a bit more, kind of. But yeah, C+ for me. C+. I'm gonna sit on that.
Yeah, Miragai. Yeah, it's pronounced Miragai. Having 4 health is really relevant, I think. But other than that, I agree. The effect is not that relevant because it's only your dragons, not your attacks. You can't be like, oh, I've got this 8 cost, the big 8 cost to attack. That doesn't lose Phantasm, for instance. So, yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's a good threat. It's 4 health. It's 2 attack. I'd give it a C+ as well. Let's move on. And next up, we've got Invoke Necria. So, Necria is same again. This is a 3 cost this time though. Defense for 3, and it transforms an Ash into Necria. And Necria says, when Necria deals or is dealt damage, put a -1 health counter on her and create an Ash token. And it has 7 health and 4 attack. So anytime that you get through a damage, you put a -1 counter on it. If it's dealt damage, say it's dealt 4 damage, then it would have 2 health left because you get a -1 health counter for that turn. But then the counter stays, but the rest of the health goes back up as they do with allies. So I like this one. I think it's just a really good threat, right?
Yeah.
Like it's hard to kill because of the 7 health. Of course, maybe after 2 turns it kind of starts to become easy to kill, but then they've kept around a 4 attack on the
3
board
for 8.
for multiple turns.
Pretty good.
Yeah, so I think this is better than something like Miragai, but I think it's not, it's definitely not Kylori level, so it's probably like a B- for me.
I have it at a B-. All right, so next up, this one. We got Uvia. Ovia. So we have so obviously it costs 2 and then it blocks for 3, and once it transforms, it's also rare. Draconic Illusionist, Dragon Ally. Attacks for 1, only 6 life. Not very good stats, Hayden. Oh wait, there's some text on it. At the start of your turn, or when an Uvia enters the arena, by the way, transform up to 1 Ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. Ooh, this one's good. This card develops a lot of advantage, I feel like. It's very grindy, particularly against Icelander. This card is annoying. 6 life. That's the part that's hard. Like, actually killing this thing, really tough. And yeah, I feel like Uvia is just one of the better dragons. It's probably the one that I want to open maybe the most. The Snatch one debate. Yeah, Snatch one maybe more, but Uvia I think is very, very good, especially for what I think you want to be doing in Dromai, which is not like a particularly just like super aggressive like linear deck. I think you want to be more mid-rangey, more grindy. So it's a B+ for me.
I agree. You do want to be. It's. I think you're trying to overwhelm your opponent and get board presence, and Ovia definitely helps you do that. The 6 health is, like you say, it is hard to deal with, and let's not forget you have to deal all of that in one turn. It's not like you deal 3 and the next turn you can deal 3. They heal back up at the end of turn, right? So you have to be able to kill them, right? I've just made that up.
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah.
I'm just making sure that I haven't like that. Yeah, that's how allies work. So you have to kill it in the turn unless you get -1 health counters like you do with Necria. So yeah, the only thing I'd say of the downside is it does attack for 1. So in itself, it's like the threat of it is what it's doing on the board. It's not the damage it's dealing. So yes, it can get out of control. You think about like Shimmers of Silver or something. That's something I compare this to, I think, to some degree. But you also need the Ash, right? So I'm like a B- on Ovia. I think it's more in line with the power level of Necria for me. I think it's still better than Miragai, but I don't think it's as like anywhere as good as like Kyloria. It's probably it's around like that Chromai level to me. So I'm gonna give it a B-.
Mm-hmm.
It does cost 2.
Yeah, it does cost 2.
Yeah. Next up we have Invoke Timai, and this is a 2 cost invocation as well. Again, just defense 3 as they all do. And Timai says opponents can't play cards or activate abilities during your turn. Has 3 attack and 4 health. I think this card is very good. I think this card is very good against Icelander. It's probably an A against Icelander. I saw an Icelander opponent on the final table playing for their like 6-0 for their box and getting, or maybe it was 5 and maybe trying to get to 5-0 playing against an Icelander. And there was a Timai, and then that died, and then there was another Timai, and then Icelander was not in a good spot. So I think it's very good. 4 health. The 4 health breakpoint I think is really important. It's hard to kill. It's not as easy to deal with. You can't just like come in with like your fire weapon or something. These 3 cost attacks. The 3 power attacks. But this doesn't stop Quell. This does stop certain things, but not Quell because it's a triggered ability. I'm gonna give this like a B-, I think, but against Icelander it's an A.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll side with you on that one. I haven't the sort of the privilege to play against Icelander yet. So next we have Invoke. Oof, that's
Vincerakai.
Vincerakai. That's a mouthful. It's at rare, and it costs 3 and blocks for 3. And when you transform it into an ally, it has 6 attack but only 1 life. And it says whenever, what is it again?
Vincerakai.
Vincerakai hits a hero, deal 3 arcane damage to them. So I think it's effective. Is it effectively a 3 for 9? You should. I mean, ideally you're able to swing this on the turn that you create it. It pretty much probably dies the turn after, almost guaranteed. Is it good enough at that? I just had it as a C+, haven't had a chance to play with it. It just seems kind of average. It's a lot of damage, don't get me wrong. It's a lot of damage. But yeah, that arcane damage also has to go face. It cannot hit a dragon or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to deal with. Even Icelander can deal with this really easily, in terms of like some of the incidental damage it has to any target. Not the weapon though, but a lot of the other damage. It's 2 cards for threatening 9, right? That's pretty good. But yeah, you need the Ash to do it, and then it can die. And 6 is like, if it was like 7, I'd be like, wow, like the breakpoint's crazy. That's so hard to deal with. 6 is not impossible to deal with, to defend out and then come back with a card. And often you don't even have to spend a full card to deal with this, right? It could just be an 8th Ashwing or maybe some incidental damage off something else. So yeah, I think Vincerakai for me, C+ as well. I think it's fine, but it's definitely not up there. Next we have Invoke Yindarai. And this is a 1-cost invocation. And then Yindarai says, Yindarai enters the arena with an endurance counter on him. If Yindarai would be dealt damage, remove an endurance counter from him to prevent 3 of that damage. It attacks 3 and has 3 health. So effectively it has 2 lives.
Yeah.
It has 6 health effectively. You have to, you could deal
4 health.
yeah, 4 to 6 maybe. So you have to deal it some damage and then deal it again. So it takes 2 sources to kill it, which is annoying. It costs 1. I think if this costs 0, it would be like up there, right? I think it'd be better than Chromite potentially. The fact it costs 1 means you can't do the kind of 0 cost dragon thing. Sometimes 1 cost is actually not a downside, unless you pitch to create an Ash, but sometimes it is. So I think this is just like solid C+, reasonable threat, kind of hard to deal with, but not overall that hard.
It's exactly the same grade I had. So heading into the Illusionist attack actions and non-attack actions, we have Billowing Mirage. This is Draconic Illusionist attack action. It's a common, attacks for 3, blocks for 3, and cost 1. We're looking at the red one here. When you attack with Billowing Mirage, transform up to 1 Ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. Go again. So inherit, go again, 1 for 3. Powerful, I think. I think this is what you want to be doing to start your combat chains. Like, this is pretty much exactly it. That being said, I think it's just a powerful role player at that. So I have it at a C+.
Yeah, it's a good way to trigger the go again for dragons and generate a threat. It's effectively 4 for 1, right? In terms of like what you're presenting, because it turns something to gets you the Ashwing. I think red, and I quite like blue as well, because I think you need some resources in these deck, and I want my resources to be cards that I can also pitch a red to be able to play. And that's what Billowing Mirage is, right? It generates the threat still, comes in for 1. Yeah, that's kind of whatever, but it lets me pitch the red still. So I think it's fine. I think it's just like a C for me. I think it's solid, but I think there are some better options out there. Next up, we've got Dunebreaker Senpai. When Dunebreaker, and it's a 5 attack, 3 defense, and I'm looking at red. It costs 1, and it has Phantasm. And when Dunebreaker Senpai is destroyed, create an Ash token. Go again. So I think just good source of damage. Has go again naturally, which is nice. You want that. Of course, can be destroyed by a popper. But like pitch an Ash, come in with this, and then come in with your Ash Wings or your Dragon or whatever. Like, it's just going to be a good damage turn, and it's still defense for 3. So I think this is just a good solid C.
Yeah. So I think these cards are actually pretty good. These senpais, whatever you want to say. Just because there's not a lot of poppers. I mean, maybe in draft that will change, but honestly, I don't think so, because a lot of those 6 ones, those 6 attacks are probably going to be drafted pretty early, because most of them are in generic, right? And they're pretty powerful on their own. So I think you're going to find a lot of situations where this is going to be a 1 for 5. And I think that these cards are actually really, really good at grinding your opponent out, especially in sealed. There's another one we're going to talk about soon, but yeah, for me, I think I'm going to put this at a C+ and maybe a B-. Like, I have to see how it plays out when I'm able to get more access to these cards in something like draft, and then play them against other opponents who are in that same pod, because it does seem quite powerful to me. 1 for 5,
Yeah,
defense for 3. Obviously Phantasm, but yeah.
I played a draft with a Droma deck, and I had a few of these, and they were good. They were solid. Um, they weren't advancing my board state, which I think is really important with Dromai, and I think that's kind of a downside to them. But you do need some of these cards, so that's why for me, like, it is just kind of a role player. The red might be a C plus at best, but yeah, it's kind of where I'm sitting right now.
Mm. All right. So next we have Dust Up. This is a Draconic Illusionist attack action. Attacks for 3, defense for 3. We're looking at the yellow here. So at red, it attacks for 4. Cost 0. It says when Dust Up hits, create an Ash token, then transform one Ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. So it doesn't have Go Again. Yeah, I think this is I think it's good filler. Like, it's a lot of value hitting. If you have a breakpoint or something like 4, add 0, of course. Also blocks for 3, but is transforming one of your Ash into an Aether Ashwing. I think it's going to be a great finisher on your combat chain. So I'll have it at C plus. Probably C at the rest of the colors. I think it's just filler. But yeah, the red one seems particularly good.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is filler, and I think this is like a D plus. Like, I think this is pure filler. I don't think this card's good. I think it's good in certain decks where you can leverage. We talked about before. Like Romai or something. This is kind of nice because you can get the action point to make the on-hit effect relevant. But basically, right, if I turn one of my important resources in the form of Ash into an Aether Ashwing, and then I don't get to attack with it, and then my opponent can just, obviously it does take them pointing some damage at the next turn. Like, that is relevant. But not getting basically that 1 damage in with it straight away is like a real downside, I think. And yes, this costs 0, which is good, a good threat on the end. I mean, I think the red might be like a C minus. But in most decks, I think you actually aren't gonna really want this card. I think there's other cards you're gonna want over this. So yeah, I don't even think it's like necessarily a role player. I think a lot of times it's just gonna be pure filler. I think you have to be careful about how many of these kinds of things you have. So I'm like on a D plus C minus.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Embermore Centipie. This is another Phantasm attack. It costs 2, and we're looking at the blue here. Attacks for 6, defense for 3. And when Embermore Centipie is destroyed, create an Ash token. So it has the same text again as Phantasm, but this time costs 2, doesn't have Go again. And at red, attacks for 8, yellow 7, blue 6. This is a really good source of damage. Like, this is just, like you say, there's not that many poppers in this format. I actually prefer this over the Go Again one, although I think the Go Again one is a good way to start a chain. It's risky, and there's better ways to start your chain to get the red attack for Go Again, or the red card for Go Again off your weapon. Whereas this, I think, is just like a good finisher on the end of something. So really good in like 4 and 5 card hands. I think the blue is really valuable because it's a good resource card, but also a good threat when you draw multiple resource cards. I think even the yellow is pretty good. Red's really good. Just pure damage. I think this is like a C plus for me. I like this card. Yeah.
Yeah, C plus for me as well for the exact reasons. And I'm sort of mulling between this idea of playing quite a few of these in a deck and just seeing if that's something like opponents can deal with, because 2 for 8 is going to grind your opponent out really quickly. Especially if you're doing something before it. Like, that's a lot.
That's the kind of thought I had. I just couldn't really pick up many of them at the table I was at. But also there's only 2 Centipies, so it's not like there's that much to pick up.
It could be. Yeah, like, it could be really good. That's just like, I don't know. I feel like I just have to get boots on the ground and start playing this deck that I'm thinking about, particularly in draft. But yeah, if they have 2 poppers in the deck, which is probably a lot, but let's say 1 on average, like 2 for 8 is going to be brutal. And so is 1 for 5. So yeah, we'll have to see. All right, so next up we have Sweeping Blow. This is Draconic Illusionist attack action. We're looking at the common. We're looking at the red one here as well. Attacks for 3, blocks for 3, cost 1. It says when you attack with Sweeping Blow, create an Ash token, Go again. Yeah, I think this is C to C plus, like, good filler. Like, I think this is probably the red attack that you want to be starting off with pretty often.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple we're gonna get to that I think is the best of these kind of effects to start a turn. But I think this is like along the lines of Billy Mirage, solid C. Prefer the red, of course, because that's where you want to be. But I think the others are playable, but like maybe C minuses.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, Rake the Embers.
Yeah.
This is a Draconic Illusionist non-attack action. These have all been commons that we've talked about since the Dragons. Sorry, I know we haven't been on top of the rarities. Cost 1, defense 2, Rake the Embers, and we're looking at the red one here. It says create an Ash token, then transform up to 3 Ash you control into Aether Ashwings. Go again. At yellow, you're going to transform 2. At blue, transform 1. This is the threat at red I want to start my turn with in Dromai. This is going to create an Ash token. This is going to let me, with all my stacked up resources of Ash tokens, create more Aether Ashwings. just create go wide threats. One cost for 3 threats on the board. Like this is plus the Ash. Like this is really what I want. I think this is kind of like this is the kind of card I would hedge to maybe go into Dromai, and then if I'm in Dromai, this is like one of the top cards I'm looking for. I think at red, this is like I think this might be a B plus at red. I think this might be like literally one of the best cards for Draconic Illusionist. And then I think in the other colors, it's kind of like around like a high C. Because it still does create an Ash and transform an Ash, which is a good place to be, but it's not a red. Yeah. Where are you, Brendan?
100% agree. I think this is like the best thing you can do to start your combat chains. A lot of people agree with that too. I got that sentiment from a lot of people that are playing Dromai. It's like this is one of those cards that when you're opening your deck, this is kind of what you're looking for initially. When you're building up that archetype, especially as sealed. All right, so next we have.
How many of these do you want? How many of these do you want? Like, if you're building this, do you want? Are you looking like 3, 4, 5 of these? Like, how many are you looking to have? I guess they can pitch and they can also just be played, right?
Yeah, so I think I could do 5. To be honest, that's probably a high end, but I think I could do 5. 5 reds. I think you'd be sitting in a good spot.
Yeah, it only creates 1 Ash, right? So you do need to otherwise generate Ash. Yeah, it's good.
All right. So next we have Skittering Sands. This is Draconic Illusionist non-attack action at common. It has no attack, but it has defense for 2. It costs 0, and it says transform target Ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. It gains +3 until end of turn. Go again. I really like this card, specifically at red. So I know this is sort of you're coming to a similar issue with having a lot of the Rake the Embers where you're going to need that Ash, but this is effectively 0 for 4. And you keep the permanent around, right? You keep the Aether Ashwing around. So yeah, I do like this card. I would probably put it at C plus. I might creep up into B minus, but that sounds like a lot. Yeah, it's a good one for me.
I think this is like maybe a little bit of a polarizing card for me. I think in certain decks this card is good. Like it's like a C plus, maybe even B minus, like you say, in certain like these kind of like Dromai aggressive decks that are playing Phoenix Flames and have the cards to do it and trying to play Rupture cards. Even I'm not like super sure that's the kind of deck I want to build. And I actually think that like in these Dromai decks that are a bit more patient and want to just like overwhelm the board state, this card is kind of like not the card you want. It's like literally you're paying a card to turn a resource on the board into something else. And yes, you get +3 damage out of it, but that's not really what you're looking for. And I think in those decks, where you like Rake the Emberclaw and you're trying to like invoke and build these things up and use your Ash really wisely, I think this card is like a C minus, even like maybe even a D. So this card's like kind of polarizing for me and is really going to depend on the build you have. I think if I was just given an overall grade, I'll just give it a C minus. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's worse than like the Billowings and stuff like that, which is like 3 damage but does cost 1. The good thing about this, right, is that it doesn't cost. So you do potentially want some cards that don't cost that you can start the chain and then pitch to play something else to generate an Ash in a turn, and also turn on the attack that you're coming with. So yeah, it's fine. Next up, Brendan, we've got Sand Cover. This is a Draconic Illusionist instant. Cost 0. We're looking at the red one here, and it says target Ash control gains Ward 4 until end of turn. Just to recap, Ward says if your hero would be dealt damage, prevent X of that damage and destroy this. So for this, it's 4, yellows 3, blues 2. I think the flexibility and the sort of like versus like this card has flexibility, but like the premium nature and the flexibility of your actual Ash means that I think this is maybe not as good as I'd hoped it would be. Like I thought this would be quite a strong card into most matchups, whereas it seems kind of situationally good against Icelander and like Rupture turns. It's still a 0 for 4 at red, so it's like kind of average D react, but it does use your Ash, and I think that's kind of some premium value. So I think this card is like I think it's like a C minus, sideboard C plus versus Icelander probably.
That's what I have as well. The Ash is not guaranteed, right? And that's like a resource you're going to be wanting to using for plenty of things if you're playing Dromai. So, I mean, this card literally can be dead. I think that if this card is dead for you, it probably should be a wake-up call that you maybe shouldn't have in your deck. But, yeah, I don't know. Like, it just looks like a D-react that's a bit conditional. Obviously, you're hitting arcane damage as well. But, like, and I have something like Oasis Respite in the set. I'm good, I'm chilling on that arcane damage. Like I don't need this sort of conditional, maybe just a completely dead card that's coming up my arsenal because I can't generate Ash or something silly like that. Yeah, so it's a C minus for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think like the red one's the only good one to be honest, because like at least it can pitch and trigger Dromai.
Yeah, and I said C minus, but to be fair, I'm probably not playing this just like by default. It's probably going to be a
No,
sideboard card.
I think it might actually be D.
Yeah,
I think it might be a
I think it's a
plus,
D,
to be
and
honest.
it's like a sideboard. All right, so next up, we're heading into the Illusionist cards. So we have the Silent Stilettos. This is an Illusionist equipment legs at common. Has 0 defense. It says whenever an attacking ally you control dies or an attack action card you control is destroyed by Phantasm, you may pay 3 resources. If you do, destroy Silent Stilettos and gain 1 action point. Then it has Arcane Barrier 1. Yeah, so is this effect as much as Sandiki? Nah, but it's really good. So I think it's an A minus. Like I think you want these boots if you're playing Illusionist, and because you're going one of, I think even if you're playing the Senpai deck where you're having a lot of Phantasms that are over, a bit pushed, and you just expecting your opponents to have like less than 1 or 2 poppers, it's good. It's okay in that deck. And then if you're going the opposite of that and you're grinding out with dragons, it's still decent. So I think it's an A minus for me.
Yeah, I think you can reasonably expect your opponent to have 1 popper. The issue I ran into with this card is that 3 resources is a ton
lot, yeah.
with the Senpais, right? So actually, I don't think it has much value with those. It's more around the dragons. This is like a B plus for me. I don't think it's in the realm of the Silken Form or the Sash, but I think it's good. Like all these equipment are good. It has Arcane Barrier, has utility, and then I just think that activated ability is like not as good as the triggered ability as it were. It's not as good as some of the activated abilities we have in the set with the others. So there's like a B plus for me. I actually think it's like in the weaker end of the equipment, just because of the resource constraint. But in certain decks, it's going to be like super important, and you are going to want this. Like the leg slot has pretty minimal competition, and just having this kind of backup for when, because you could just get your whole turn blown out, right? Like you flip an invocation with this big 5-card hand you're trying to come in with, and then they pop the first attack. Like that, this is going to be super relevant. So yeah, it is still really good. I'm gonna go B plus.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we've got Transmogrify, which is a illusionist action. We're looking at the red one here. It costs 1 and says the next action card you play this turn is illusionist, has 8 base attack, and it gains Phantasm. It keeps its other card types. Go again. Defense for 2. This is at rare. I like this as a way to turn a 0 cost like blue or yellow into better threats. And it might be like one of the best resource cards at blue for being able to do that because
blue,
yeah. But otherwise, I'm kind of whatever on it, to be honest. Maybe it's good with something like Dust Up. You get to keep you get the base attack, you get to keep the on-hit effects. That's quite relevant. Maybe like Lava Burst because it gets the base attack plus the buff damage or Burn Away or whatever. Could be 6 to 10 damage, but you're paying 6 to 10 damage like 3 cards. I think this is like a C minus to maybe a C at blue.
I really like this card, but I think it might be a trap running it and just kind of depending on it. Running too many of them, potentially, like drafting it too highly. The blue one where you turn effectively, you have to look at it like this. You're going to use this card to turn your blue resource cards when you draw that sort of heavy blue hand or something like that into a 6 attack base.
They cost you 3.
Yeah, it's expensive.
So much.
Yeah, but it's expensive, but it's better than hitting for 1 or even sometimes even 4 if that like one of those blues have been replaced by a red or something like that. So I think it's serviceable, but I think playing a lot of them is a trap. And I think people will draft this much too highly. I think this is going to be like the best card in the set for a lot of people. And I don't think it is that. I'm going to put it at C because I think it is flexible at blue. I actually do. And I probably would play the red. Again, it's hard for me to get like the pulse on how exactly good these cards are because I haven't played that deck yet. I haven't played the deck with a bunch of Phantasm that sort of overcommits to its attacks and then maybe gets blown out. It's like, how impactful is that and how game losing is it? So yeah, it's going to be a C for me.
I don't know. I'm going to go down to even like a D plus for anything but blue and C minus for blue. Prove me wrong. I don't know. This card to me doesn't seem very good, and I was not impressed with it whenever I saw it over the weekend. But we'll see.
All right. So heading into Phi, I'm going to read the hero first. So Draconic Ninja hero. Look at the young one. 4 intellect, 20 health. It says you may start the game with a Phoenix Flame in your graveyard, which you should. And then it says once per turn instant, 3 resources, return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. Stability costs 1 less for each Draconic Chain Link you control. I think that this deck is probably the easiest deck to build and sealed, and probably the easiest deck to have success with. So we did talk about this in our previous podcast, but this was the hero that I was looking at, mostly because it's a linear aggressive deck and it's going to punish people that try to get cute with their sealed pools. It's just a lot to deal with. It feels like it can utilize a lot of a lot of cards, right? Like a lot of the generic cards, the Draconic cards, and of course its class cards. So I think that it's making a lot of those tools effective, right? Where if you look at something like Dramai, some of them it's like, it might not be very good in Dramai. Like, seems like most things are pretty decent in Fi, because you can even end combat chains with them. So Fi, fundamentally powerful, probably the deck to beat in sealed. We'll see how it does in draft, but yeah, good hero.
Interesting. I actually think Icelander might be the deck to beat and sealed once we sort of get to some of these cards. But I think my Iceland deck was better than my Fire deck when I went back and looked at my sealed pool. And I think I would need some time just playing and understanding the play patterns of Icelander. I think it's a bit more difficult to maybe play. The other thing I want to say about Fire is a couple of notes that I have is just from like the world premiere and sort of the drafts that I've witnessed and been involved with is the second flame. Once you get that in, like it's usually correct to like get back the flame and rather than play like Arsenal and set up 5-card hands. Once you get to 2 flames, that's quite important to remember. And just kind of lastly, I think is like this Fire can defend better than I thought. Like you can actually play kind of a mid range and being defending and preventing some damage rather than just a pure race in the mirror when you're sort of behind on tempo is like generally correct, I think. So yeah. Let's move on to the weapon, Searing Emberblade. This is a Draconic Ninja weapon sword 2-hander. Attacks for 3 and says once per turn, action, 2 resources attack. If you control 2 or more Draconic chain links, Searing Emberblade has go again. I was super impressed with this weapon just overall. Yeah, it's really good. I thought like the weapon was like going to be, it's like costing me resources. Like I don't want to be playing that many blues in my Fire deck.
Attacks for 3, no breakpoint, etc., etc. Like there
Yeah.
was a lot of things that made it look potentially underwhelming. But yeah, so this counts as self. So control 2 or more Draconic chain links. Yep. So that's really important, and it's also going to contribute to Fi's ability. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's well, you don't have a choice to play it or not, but it's very good, and I think that it's one of those things that's actually helping carry Fi. To be honest,
you don't have to play it.
Yeah, true.
Weapon.
You do not have to play it. But yeah, Searing Emberblade overperformed, and it's helping you satisfy a lot of those rupture cards. It's helping you, do a lot, and it only costs 2. But this is why you're playing a lot of blues, or you're playing a decent amount of blues, more than you would if I didn't have this weapon.
Yep. Yeah. All right, first card, Brendan.
Heatwave. First card is Heatwave. Is Draconic Ninja Equipment Arms. It's a common, defense for 0. It says instant, destroy Heatwave, Phoenix Flames you control, gain +1 until end of turn. It's important to note that's an instant. And it has Quell 1. So for me, this is a B+, or yeah, B+, because it's not competing with a lot. You want it if you're playing Ninja, but it doesn't feel ridiculous. It does feel ridiculous when you have 2 Phoenix Flames and you're coming for 4. Yep. Or 3. Yeah, 3 I haven't done that one yet, but obviously 3 would be very good. If you can do that consistently, this card is going to be a S+ or something like that. It's very good. But overall, this felt just decent to me. Its ability, but obviously the Quell is good. The +1 being an instant speed is also very good. And yeah, just overall great equipment to have in Ninja.
Yeah, I agree. B+. Quell is really strong. I think this is kind of slightly above par on the stilettos. This is kind of like a little mini stubby hammer sometimes, and yeah, Quell strong. So B+. Moving on, we've got Engulfing Flamewave. This is a 2-cost at rare Draconic Ninja attack action, defends 2. We're looking at the red one here, which attacks for 5, and it says when Engulfing Flamewave hits, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an action card with cost less than the number of Draconic chain links you control, banish it. You may play it this turn. So you may play that card this turn. Most of the time, this is just basically saying 2 resources, 5, go again, and on hit, draw a card. That's kind of nuts. I think this card is very, very good. I think the red is good. I think the yellow is still good. I think the blue is a good resource card, although it only defends for 2. This is like B+, maybe A- for me. I think this card is really, really strong.
Yep. It's a B+. It's so good, especially when you have a lot of 0 costs in your deck. Like you can play this without any resources up. It's just bonkers. I love this card. I particularly like it at yellow because it's a 2 for 4. 2 is expensive, but this is like, again, the Fi deck, and I think a big trap if you're heading into an event this weekend. It's going to be not playing enough blues or enough resource cards in your Fi deck because you want to be doing stuff like this. You want to be swinging the weapon. You want to be playing Engulfing Flamewave. Yeah, B+.
The only downside I have is like with yellow is I don't really like yellows in Fi. Just because I usually want like 3 resources every turn to weapon +1 cost attack, and like weapon I always want to factor in. And if I'm pitching off yellow, it's probably like 0 cost +2 costs, but it's really hard to like mess with you do that 3rd resource to get back like Phoenix Flame and stuff. So it's like kind of tough. The yellows, I want to play like this kind of yeah, I want to play like the lowest amount of yellows. Then I want like a couple of yellows that have relevant effects, like an engulfing flame
Yeah.
wave though. Like 7, 8-ish blues, and maybe 9 in some builds, and then reds. So it's interesting. But yeah, this card is really good.
All right, so next up we have Mounting Anger. This is Draconic Ninja attack action at rare. The red one attacks for 4, blocks for 2. It costs 1. It says when Mounting Anger hits, you may banish an attack action card from your hand with cost less than the number of Draconic chain links you control. If you do, it gains +1, and you may play it this turn. So and it has go again. I had one of these cards. You pretty much like it's okay, right? Because like you can hit with it on as the first attack on the chain link, and you can banish a 0 cost. It can be the 0 cost that only gets go again if you've played two or less chain links or something like that. And yeah, I like this card. I will play it. I will draft it. I'm probably just going for the red, to be honest. The blue might be okay as well, just because it's sort of an on hit. But yeah, for me, this is just gonna be it's probably a C plus, might be a B minus.
Yep, C plus for me. I agree with everything you said. It's solid. It starts chains as well, which is really nice. Like I said earlier, chain starters are like premium. They're like kind of starters, and Welcome to Wraith, you do want these. And this one costs 1. 1's a good cost number, and it comes in for 4 at red and has an effect that can turn something else into a breakpoint, which is really cool. So yeah, on board, C plus. Next up, we have Rise from the Ashes. This is a Draconic Ninja non-attack action at rare. Cost 0, defense for 2, and we're looking at the red one here. It says the next Draconic or Ninja attack action card you play this turn gains +3 attack. You may return a Phoenix Flame from your graveyard to your hand. Go again. This card's really solid. This card gets you back a Phoenix Flame. It gets a lot better once you have 2 Phoenix Flames in your graveyard.
Yep.
I think, but sometimes you're not going to be able to hit basically the downside of this card is it's not a Draconic Chain Link.
Yep.
It's not going to help you with Draconic Chain Links. I think it's the downside. So I think this is staple. I think like I compare this to something like Flamecaller in terms of like what it does. Like I know that's from your deck, so maybe it's more in line with something from the graveyard, right? So I think with that in mind, this is like I think it read it's maybe like a B minus C plus, and then it's like a C plus for like the blue and the yellow for me.
Yes, I'd probably go B minus on this. I could potentially go B on the red. The red is very powerful. But yeah, it doesn't satisfy the chain link. So next we have
the breakpoints is good. I just want to say, sorry, the breakpoints are good. Like this, the thing I was impressed with this card because I was like, this card's fine, and it was mostly fine. But then when it turned like a breakpoint higher, like I played it on on the what's the first card that the engulfing flame wave. It came in for 8. Yeah, that was kind of crushing.
Yeah, for sure. So next we have Brand with Cinderclaw. This is Draconic Ninja attack action at common, and it attacks for 3, defense for 2, and we're looking at the red one. It says, your next attack this combat chain is Draconic in addition to its other card types. Go again. So the main reason I like this card is because it's unconditional go again. I have found that the Draconic sort of clause here is just it's upside when it's upside, and when it's not upside, this card is still fine. I still play it. So for me, this is just a C. And I guess if we're looking at true role players, maybe it's a C plus because it's a 0 that just inherently has go again, and that's kind of what I want to be doing often in my 5X. But yeah, so C to C plus for me.
Yeah, I think it's a C for me. The ability was basically never relevant. I think it was relevant on a yellow scarf or a scarf for me once. Like I thought it was going to have more impact than it did, but just you don't have natural go again on a lot of those cards. So actually, that's not true. I had double strike in my deck, and it was relevant with double strike.
Jeez.
But otherwise, it was kind of whatever. So, but yeah, zero cost chain starter is really good, and 0 cost in general for Draconic Ninjas. So it's a C for me. Next up, we have Cinderskin Devotion. This is a Draconic Ninja attack at common, costs 1, defense for 3, and at red, which we're looking at, attacks for 4. And it says if you control 2 or more Draconic chain links, Cinderskin Devotion has go again. I think you need to be careful with how many of these kind of effects you have because you need chain starters. Like it's a bit of a balance. But the nice thing is these defend for 3, so they have utility. And I want some of that. So you want to balance some of these defend 3s, but they require chain links. But they're really good in like 3, 4, 5 card hands. All that said, I think this is probably one of the weaker of these effects that require you to have multiple like already on chain links because your weapon's already doing that job. I think it's like a C minus for me, maybe a C at red.
Yep, that's exactly where I have it as well. I think that a big trap if you're playing Fine Sealed is going to be to look at your 5 pool and be like, wow, I have a lot of reds. that's not it. If you have a 5 deck that doesn't have
Not it,
unconditional
you're
go
right.
again, you are going to feel pain. It is terrible. Huh. All right.
Very true.
So here we go. We got Dust Runner Outlaws, Draconic Ninja attack action. It attacks for 4, blocks for 2. It's a common. It costs 1, and it says go again. So a little leg tap here. I really like these cards. It could be maybe a bit incorrect, but I rate these pretty highly. I rate these. There's another one, it's like a head jab at a C plus, just because the unconditional go again. I really want these in my deck. This is what I would like to be starting my chain links with often. That being said, it's not incredible. So it's probably a C plus for me. I think I draft the red ones, by the way. The red ones I draft pretty highly. So I think the red's a C plus for me on Dust Runner Outlaw.
I like all of them. I'm at a C, but I'm a C for all of them. I think they're just solid. They're good role players that you want. You need some cards that create chain links and have natural go again. Chain link starters, like we say, it does defend for 2. There's some cost there, so yeah, it's just a solid C for me. Next up, we have Lava Vein Loyalty. This is a 0 cost Draconic Ninja attack action, defense for 3, at red attacks for 3. It says if you control 2 or more Draconic chain links, Lava Vein Loyalty has go again. So this is in line with the previous one we talked about, the Cinderskin Devotion. I think for me this is slightly better because it's 0 cost,
Yes.
so it allows me for like because I want this on like when I'm like particularly playing Rupture decks, 2 costs for my weapon, 1 cost for my Rupture card, or 1 cost for something like like we just talked about a Dust Run Outlaw. So this is a bit above the other one. I give this like a solid C, but mostly at red, to be honest. I'm not really keen on the other colors, although they defend for 3, so maybe blue's okay for Rupture turns, right?
Yeah, I play the other colors of this one, to be honest, because for me, Lava Vein Loyalty is like the quintessential role player. It's like that card that I open. It blocks for 3. It's going in my deck. I need to be, like, if I'm playing fine, I'm already making sure I have enough unconditional go again. And if I do, this card is fitting in, and it's fine. So this card for me, it's a C, but this is the filler card of 5 for me.
Yeah, it's solid.
All right, so next up here we have Rebellious Rush. This is a Draconic Ninja attack action at common. The red one attacks for 5, blocks for 2, costs 2, and says go again. So I know I said I liked the cycle, but the 2 cost is the weakest one for me. Playing a 2 cost to start my chain is generally not what I'm wanting to be doing. We already seen my aversion to 2 cost chain enders, so 2 cost chain starters are not going to do it for me. So for me, this is a C. It's still role play. It's like a role player enough because it's inherent go again. But I'm not picking these highly.
Yeah, I mean, this is a C minus for me. I think you're bang on with like I want my 2 costs to be doing a ton of work, like Flame Wave or Red Hot, and this one is something that's not really doing that. Go again is not that hard to come by, right? And it's not as premium as it has been in other sets, and that's kind of why I was a bit down on something like Scar for Scar. While this is unconditional, does defend 2, cost 2. The best thing about this card, I think, is the art. To be honest, I love the art on this card. But yeah, it's like a C minus for me, and I think you got to be careful about how many of these kind of 2 costs you have. Next up, we've got Rising Resentment. This is a Draconic Ninja attack action at common, cost 0 and defense for 2, and at red attacks for 3. And says when Rising Resentment hits, you may banish an attack action card from your hand with cost less than the number of Draconic chain links you control. If you do, it costs 1 less to play, and you may play it this turn. So this one's interesting. So basically at a chain link 1, which is often you want these like starters. It does nothing really, the on hit effect. But at chain link 2, 3, obviously it now starts to threaten you to basically have this real resource efficiency. At worst, this is a head jab, right? Which is really a Draconic head jab, which is really good and where you want to be. So for me, this is like above the average kind of role player. This is like a C plus. This card is going to help you do some work either as a starter or middle of the chain to threaten the ability to like use your hand more resource efficiently.
I agree. Yeah, I played this card and its effect was relevant quite a few times. So C plus for me as well. Next, speaking of head jab, we have Ronin Renegade. This is a Draconic Ninja attack action at common. It attacks for 3 at red and defense for 2, and it says go again. So this is just straight up head jab. I like it as a role player. I think really the only one that stands apart for me is like the one that's a leg tap at red. I like that one a lot. But the blue is quite good. Like just like head jab blues, great resource card. I think this is a great resource card as well. The coming in for 2 or coming in for 3, a little bit less exciting. So I think blue Ronin Renegade is, I really like it. But other than that, it's just going to be a C for me.
Interesting. Yeah, it's like the blue head jab's good because of Kadachi's, right? And Welcome to Wraith, but this doesn't really have that. I really like the 0 cost chain link starters. So we talked before about you just said you like Dust Runner or the kind of stuff, and then you were talking about like Lava Burst. For me, I much prefer, I think, like the 1 cost Rupture cards, but the 0 cost Go Again cards. So I'm looking for these kind of cards. But yeah, it's a solid C for me. Red, I probably prefer of them, but yeah, like you say, blue also good way to start the chain in a pinch if you need to, and then be a resource card if needed. So a really good sort of like 6 through 9 kind of blue cards as well, being these kind of just unconditional Go Again. Next up, we've got Soaring Strike. This is a 1 cost Draconic Ninja attack action at common, defense 2, at red attacks of 4, and says when Soaring Strike hits, you may banish an attack action card from your hand with cost less than the number of Draconic chain links you control. We're seeing that ability quite a bit. And if you do, it gains Go Again, and you may play it this turn. I think this card's fine. I think it's like, again, this is
It's effectively
this
a
is
league tap.
it's league tap plus, right? But and defense for 2, so it's effectively league tap with some sort of upside. But the Go Again, I don't think it's that relevant. One of the cool things this can do is potentially that you double Rupture in a turn, which is quite cool. So you can banish a Rupture card, give it Go Again, and then also play another Rupture card from your hand. But that's really niche, right? I think it's just like a solid C. I think you're going to want these cards just like you do with Dust Runner, these unconditional Go Again cards, and this one has some upside.
Yeah, it's a C plus for me just because I really like 1 for 4 Go Again to start it off. But that's about it. I just think that is fundamentally powerful and something I want to be doing in Fi. But yeah, the ability, yeah, like I had a few of these in my list, and the ability was not relevant ever.
Yeah, I mean it's slightly better than Dust Runner, right?
Definitely. Yeah, so we're coming into the armor here, just the ninja armor. We have Tide Flippers. This is ninja equipment legs at common, defends for 0. It says attack reaction, destroy Tide Flippers, target attack action with 2 or less base attack, gains Go Again. Arcane Barrier 1. So yeah, I think this is an A. It's just good. You want the Arcane Barrier anyway. The attack reaction is non-zero and can help you out when you're struggling for Go Again, which those are your off turns. I feel like in Fi a lot. It's like you draw a hand, you're like, wow, there's no unconditional Go Again. I can't do anything because you really want to get that first, whatever that first thing is on the chain. It needs to have sort of unconditional Go Again because then your sword gets it. Then after the sword, you can usually get the Phoenix Flame out of the graveyard, etc., etc. So I think Tide Flippers is very, very good, and I want it in all of my ninja decks. So it's going to be an A for me.
Cool. I'm glad we're finally going to disagree on something in Ninja because we've been mostly agreeing on stuff. I think this is like one of the worst equipments in the set. I think Arcane Barrier is the most relevant text on this, and that's super relevant into Icelander. I think the attack reaction is almost close to being irrelevant. I think there's very few attacks that don't already have natural Go Again that have with base attack 2 or less, not cost, base attack 2 or less, that you're going to be playing in your deck. I had this in my deck, and I had the Quell leagues as well. I played the first 2 rounds of this Tide Flippers and was like, I had like Burn Away and something else. I was like, I have like 2 targets for this. It's real bad. Swapped it out, and then I was watching my friend play Fire and Draft, and like hear this as well. And then we were talking about like this versus the Quell and just how much better the Quell is. It's just, yeah, I think this is one of the just. It's still equipment. It's still good. It still has really it still does have a relevant ability. It's not close to 0. Like I said, it is relevant, and you can build around it to make sure that you have some blue resources that you can Tide Flippers if you need to. Arcane Barrier obviously relevant, but I don't think this compares to Heat Wave. I don't think this compares to Stilettos. I definitely don't think this is like Sash is an A for me. I think it's like a B minus for me. I would take Quell leagues over this. I think almost every day of the week, even when I'm already in Fi.
Yeah, so I definitely wouldn't, but I guess it's contextual on your deck, right? If your deck has less unconditional Go Again, and you are going to have a higher potential to get stuck with those hands to just do nothing, because I think those hands are like very game.
Because you've got all these bad Lava Bursts in your deck, though.
All right, like this card is very good. It converts like a hand where you're basically you could potentially be doing nothing and might even lose the game result into actually being able to play the game because you're going to be able to swing your sword after and then play a relevant threat. Just going like 1 for 4 on your turn is often not very good. If you did have something of that Go Again, so this is kind of bailing you out. So I like that. It feels like a bailout, right? Like I feel like
That's kind of my point. Is I don't think it is. I don't think there's that many targets for it. That's kind of why I don't think it's a bailout. I think it's kind of like, what is it actually bailing you out on the cards you're actually gonna have in your deck? Like Lava Burst, yeah, I think Lava Burst is fine. I get it. That's one target, but what else are you targeting? Burn Away? Like,
what? No, definitely not Lava. No, so you're thinking about all the reds. This is like you draw a hand, it doesn't have unconditional Go Again, which we haven't got to talk about in this card yet, and you just have like a couple blues, right? And so now you're taking your like whatever that loyalty is card, the one that takes you 2 chain link or more to get go again. Lava Vein Loyalty, maybe you have like the yellow or the blue in hand. You play that as your first combat chain. You activate these. You now have unlocked your weapon. You attack with your weapon. Then you unlocked Phi. You attack with the Phoenix Flame, and then maybe end with like a 1 for 4 or a 0 or something like that, right? So just bailing you out of a turn that does absolutely nothing because you can't get go again.
I mean, you can defend with your cards though.
True, but
like I get the bailout sort of, I guess, mechanic of this card, but I think that's kind of so-so. Like I actually don't think it's as relevant as you think it is, and it definitely hasn't been relevant so far what I've seen. But I do agree that it will be relevant at some points. But I think that it's not going to be relevant in every game. It's a one-time use. I definitely don't think it's up there. Like you're saying, this card is in line with Sash, right? Like that's pretty huge. Better than
so I'd rather have Sash, of course, but it doesn't like in Ninja. I don't think it's competing with the Quell Legs unless you have a egregiously good deck, like egregiously.
Yeah, I do like blocking the Phi. Yeah. Do you think this is better than Heatwave? Better than
yeah, I do think
Stilettos?
I think this is better than Heatwave. Stilettos, I don't know. I haven't been able to experience that side too much.
Cool. We'll see. We've got that's probably our biggest discrepancy on grade so far, I think. B- versus an A, but we'll see. Next up, we've got Rapid Reflex. This is the ninja attack reaction, cost 1, defense for 3 at rear, and it says target attack action with cost 0 gains +2. That's the yellow version. At red, it's +3, and at blue, it's +1. I mean, going wide in this format is much better because of obviously Draconic Chain Links and what Fire's trying to do. But you do have some relevant on-hit effects, and this is going to help you get those through. Whether it be some of the Rupture cards, Rising Resentment, whether it's going to be the Flame Wave, some of these on-hit effects we just saw, Engulfing Flame Wave. So I think this is like a build around C+, but this card, it's still defensive 3, which is good. But in some decks, I think this is kind of going to be so-so. I like the blue. I just like the fact it's a resource card. It's a 1 cost that can push stuff over defense for 3. Otherwise, yeah, I'm kind of so-so on this card.
Yeah, did you say you were playing this on Engulfing Flame Wave?
Oh yeah, I'm not. Of course, that's cost 0.
Yeah,
this
card sucks, bro.
Oh, Rising Resentment. Yeah, okay.
This card is terrible. Yeah, this card is literally dog water. It's like a 0 block for 3 at best, I think, and like I think you want to get it in blue just for that reason. But outside of that, like this card just sucks, man. Yeah, for me,
0 cost.
it's pretty relevant because you're like, wow, you're like raise the reflex blocks for 3, like pretty good. But outside of that, yes, I think this card is like a D- minus.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's like a D. Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe build around sort of C in the right deck with enough 0 cost and stuff. But yeah, not really where you want to be.
All right, so heading into Icelander, I got you. Don't worry. The Elemental Wizard, the sort of third piece to our pie. So Icelander, Elemental Wizard, young, 4 intellect, 18 health, so starting at 18. Essence of Ice. You may have ice cards in your deck. And the card, or the hero text says, if it is not your turn, you may play a blue non-attack action cards from your arsenal as though they were an instant. Whenever you play an ice card during an opponent's turn, create a frostbite token under their control. Quickly, it's going to transfer over here into the weapon so we can get more contacts. You have Waning Moon here as a token. Wizard weapon, staff, 2-hander. Says once per turn, instant deal. For 2 resources, deal 2 arcane damage to target hero. If it is not your turn, instead deal 3 damage to them. This is very important because there's a lot of periods in here, and I don't think it's particularly well templated. The last sentence, and this applies to both of the previous sentences, activate this ability only if you have played a non-attack action card this turn. So this applies to both your turn and the opponent's turn.
You can never activate this weapon unless you've already played non-attack action.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
So this deck, I think that Icelander's like quite powerful.
I agree.
Actually easier to make work than a lot of people probably think. That being said, what does it really suffer? So there's a lot of I know if you run into a bunch of Oasis Respite, it can be a bit annoying. Particularly for my 5 deck, it had 3 red Oasis Respite, which was very, very good against the Icelander decks. But ultimately, the arcane damage is virtually unblockable. They might have 1 arcane barrier. They have Quell, of course, which you have to kind of work through. And this weapon hitting for 3 on your opponent's turn, very, very powerful. Hayden, what do you think? Have you? I think you said you hadn't had a lot of chance to play Icelander. The interesting part of Icelander comes to playing cycles and when to play the non-attack out of your arsenal and when to not, right? Because I think that you kind of particularly want to have that non-attack blue cost when you're actually killing them, right? You don't want to like overextend, get them to like 2 or something, not have an arsenal, and then they just get to blast you with a 5-card hand. Like I think you'd
Really
lose
on
those
the turn.
games. Yeah, pretty often.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about picking your spots, right? It's all about understanding how the game's going to ebb and flow. Most of my opponents I saw that were playing Icelander, their kind of downfall was either defending when they shouldn't or not defending when they shouldn't. Basically, defending when they shouldn't, and then defending when they probably should be, just attacking. So rather stuffing
Yeah.
this up, attacking when they should be defending. Wow, long pod. But yeah, it's all about picking spots, and then, like you say, you have to have that final way to deal damage to activate that waning moon. You've got to have that kind of in the pocket, or be able to survive the next turn to maybe get through to just deal them some straight up damage from a card, and understand where your points come and how best to play around cards like Oasis, how to play into Quell and things like that. So Icelander, I think, I think Dromai to me is still the most interesting, but I think Icelander is like probably the most like powerful just inherently, and then like Fire is just good.
Yeah, so I think in Icelander there is the divide between good cards and bad cards feels the most noticeable to me. Like I think there's generally cards that are just incredible in Icelander, and then there's cards that are like really crappy filler, like to be honest.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
being able to get like enough Ice Fusion cards and like what that looks like, what you should be prioritizing, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, in Icelander, I felt the biggest divide between like the very impactful cards and then the cards that just kind of suck.
I felt that in Dromai, but yeah, I can see it. Let's get into the cards anyway, Brennan, and talk about the first one, which is Sigil of Permafrost. So we're talking about elemental wizard cards here to start with. So this is an elemental wizard defense reaction, costs 1. It's a rare, and at red it defends for 4, and it has Ice Fusion. So as an additional cost to play Sigil of Permafrost, you may reveal an ice card from your hand. If Sigil of Permafrost was fused, the next time you deal arcane damage to a hero this turn, create that many Frostbite tokens under their control. So important to remember, this isn't a non-attack action, so doesn't trigger your Waning Moon. So you need to play something else after this. But I guess the general play pattern with this to get the real full power out of it is pitch a blue, play this, maybe play like a 0 cost, either ice blue that deals with damage out of your hand, then also trigger the weapon. And the cool thing is, right, is that you can actually respond to the card you play. So even if your blue out of Arsenal deals arcane damage, you can play it and then respond with the Waning Moon to deal 3 damage first that way, so that triggers off the Sigil Permafrost. So I think it's really cool. I think this card is good. I think defense reactions are good. I think one that costs 1, so lines up well with other things you're trying to do, especially if you have a 0 blue in Arsenal, or even if you don't, even if you have like a 2 cost, maybe you don't get to activate weapon, but you still get to deal some damage. I think this is just like a really solid B. Might even be a B plus.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna disagree on too. So I think this card actually kind of sucks. The red one is okay. So like 1 for 4 defense reaction, pretty good. You can use your resources on plenty of things, especially in Icelanders, things like Quell, of course. But yeah, so the idyllic situation where you play this out of hand with a blue, and then you play another blue out of arsenal, and then wand them is just like kind of whack, right? And it's a bit high variance because it's going to be the hand where you draw this, right? You're not going to be able to arsenal and sort of pick your spot. And at that same time, you're going to need the resources to do that. This is going to have to block a relevant threat, et cetera, et cetera. And you have to fuse it, right? And you have to fuse it. If you don't fuse it, I think it kind of sucks. But if you do fuse it, yeah, it can be impactful. It can give your opponents frostbites. I think the red is playable. The other two, I think, are like particularly really bad, because especially if you have like blue defense reactions that are blocking for 2, I think you'll find yourself dying a lot, actually, because they gum up your hand and they're not efficient. The yellow, maybe that's efficient enough, but I really don't like this card. I like it in red. I played it in red, but I know in my draft, like I actually drafted like some of the others because I thought it was really good at first glance, and it felt terrible. It felt really bad.
I think like you're talking about this kind of magical Christmas land for this card to line up. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think the ceiling on it is like really high, and that's why I've given it a B, because I think it is, you do have to ice fuse, you do have to blue to play out of Arsenal, but you're playing a lot of blues in these decks, and you are wanting the ice cards actively. Most of them are pretty good. So, and I think the downs, like the kind of like ceiling on this is like, okay, I pitch a red card because I have too many red cards in my hand. I still get to defend for 4. I agree. I actually think yellow is the worst. I think blue is playable as a resource. I think red is the one that's good. But even if you go, okay, I pitch, I play this, I then play my blue card out of Arsenal, and I swing my weapon, you've spent what, 1, 2, 3 cards for saving 4 damage, 3 damage off the weapon, plus whatever your other thing's doing. So 7 to 9 damage, 7, maybe 7, 8 damage, or 7 plus frostbite, or you play a the one that freezes an Arsenal and draws a card, or whatever. Like I think it's pretty reasonable, and I think the red is like actively quite good, and the blue is fine.
Yeah, so I think the red is serviceable, but the others are like borderline unplayable. But the reason this is like fusing is really it's not that easy as well, because you're just like, oh, play ice cards in your deck, right? You just play your ice cards, you draft your ice cards. Well, if you're playing Icelander, you're only really drafting a certain kind of ice card as well. You're not just drafting like ice cards. You know, the yellows are also just kind of trash most of the time because you're resource intensive, and often you're either like playing a one cost and then you're swinging the blade. So if you have like yellows and things like that, they're pretty bad. Even as resource cards, obviously if the 0 cost at Arsenal is fine, but we're thinking like Aether Hail is like ideal, I guess, to sometimes to an extent. And then so there's like you don't have that many to pick from to get your ice cards in the first place, and I think that it gets really narrow when you start drafting. You start figuring out, you're like, oh wow, I'm gonna have to really work to find like cards to fuse with here, and then. Yeah, I just don't like the idea of like when I draw this, that's when it's good. And then like other than there, like I can't really do anything with it. It just like doesn't really do anything in my hand. It's bad to pitch, etc., etc. And I need to have that like a relevant 0 cost to pair with that. Because sometimes when I'm playing Icelander, I can park a few things in my arsenal. If we're getting close to the end game, yeah, I might park a 3 for 5 or something that's red. But sometimes you park like a Scar for Scar or something with just inherent go again, or like a trade in, something like that. So yeah, for me, like the red is probably a C to C plus, and then I think that the others are like getting down to like D ranges.
Okay.
I just think it's asking a bit too much.
That's fine. I just think the asking too much. That was kind of my point. Is like even the kind of middle ground on this card is still good. It's still quite good actually. And then like the floor on it, which is you pitch a card to defend for 4, is like obviously
defend for 4.
Good,
you're right. So the red, like that's the red, yeah. So
right,
I think
I'm talking about the red. I'm only talking about the red. I've already conceded. I think the yellow is probably not where you want to be, and the blue is fine. But I also think that the yellow ice cards, I think you're maybe undercalling, just in terms of the fact that weapon costs 2, and yeah, I'm sure we'll get to some of these anyway. But yeah, I think Sigil Permafrost in red, I think is like a B, and then yeah, probably in blue is like a high C, and yellow is probably not where you want to be. Probably filler.
All right, so next we have Ice Eternal. This is elemental wizard action. Defense for 3, cost XX, and it's blue. It's a rare. It says Icelander specialization, Ice Fusion. So this is a reveal card from your hand. Create X frostbites under target hero's control. Then, if Ice Eternal was fused, deal arcane damage to that hero equal to the number of frostbites they control. So I think this is like I think this card is a C, but a build around B potentially. When you do get this off and you do fuse it, yeah, it's effective, right? It is very resource intensive, but it is quite effective. The good thing about this, and like one of my favorite parts about this card, is that it's blue. It blocks 3. And if you park it in Arsenal and don't draw the fuse card, you can still fire it off and then shoot the weapon, right? You don't have to declare an X cost here, so this could just be swing your weapon for 3 and clear your arsenal of a card that's doing nothing.
Yeah, I thought this card was like a C, but the more I've thought about it, the higher utility this card has, like just being a blue, like you say, that you can play on your turn or you can play on the opponent's turn, I think is really big. So I think actually most of the time you want to play this on your turn. So yeah, I think this is like maybe a B minus, probably a C plus. I've kind of like ebbed and flowed on this card as I've seen it be played and as I've thought about it more. And I think it's going to be bounced between like a C plus and a B depending on what your deck actually is. Next up, we've got Succumb to Winter. This is another elemental wizard, non-attack action. Of course, at rare, defends for 3 and cost 3. And we're looking at the yellow one here. It has Ice Fusion, so of course, an additional cost reveal an ice card from your hand. Deal 4 arcane damage at yellow to any target. So important that targets allies as well. If Succumb to Winter was fused and targets a hero, destroy a frozen card in their arsenal. If it was fused and targets a frozen ally, destroy their ally. So I think this card is, it's 3 for 5 at red, 4 at yellow, 3 at blue. So it's an okay rate of return, right? But that Ice Fusion ability is, I would say, fine. I think, most of the time you're going to be able to just kill allies just by targeting them with this, unless it's Necria or something, or Ovia. And the ability to take out an arsenal is pretty good, but that requires some other setup. So I think this card gets a lot better if you have the freeze card, right? The crown.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's a bit weaker. So I think it's like a C plus, but with the right support cards like these freeze cards, it's like it might be a B minus maybe. It's probably like a C and then C plus to B minus with those cards.
Yeah, I think it's a C minus. I really don't like this card. It feels basically textless, especially in limited.
Yeah.
But 3 for 5 is like, I guess 3 for 5. Like if your deck needs reach, like that's fine, I guess. But
whatever.
every
It's
other,
not nice though.
yeah, exactly. Like that's the thing. It's like it's also nice, also just elemental. So I think every version of this card, except maybe the red, is something I'd actively not want to put in my deck if possible. But ultimately, yeah, it's filler, but I think it's on the lower end of filler because when we talk about filler in Icelander, like I want a lot of my filler cards to be ice cards. Like I want fuse. So for me, C minus and probably actually borders on the D plus, but that's it. All right, so
It's always playable, right? As a card that deals damage,
playable.
but I think it'll come down. I agree. I think it's like a C and like a build around C plus B minus.
Mm-hmm. So next up we have Aether Icebane. This is an elemental wizard action. At common, it defends for 3, and it costs 3 as well. And the red one, it's an ice fusion. It says deal 5 arcane damage to any target. If Aether Icebane was fused and deals damage to a hero, they discard a card unless they pay 2. So this is a B plus, and actually borders on an A minus at red for me. I think this is probably one of the most powerful things you can be doing in Icelander. It's disgusting. Your opponent can't really block 5. Almost guaranteed. They might be able to blast all of their quell or something like that, or just really dump resources into it and prevent this, but it's effectively doing what you want it to do if you in that situation anyway, right? Which is they're kind of discarding cards or paying 2. So 3 for 5, like we said, that made the other card like borderline playable as to give you reach, but this is 3 for 5 with like an incredibly relevant on hit, which is the opponent discards a card or pays 2 resources. This card is amazing. I think the red is probably going to be one of the highest, the highest value picks for Icelander in draft.
So, I think Brendan. I'm glad we agree. I was starting to sweat about how much we're disagreeing on some of these wizard cards. I think this is the best wizard card.
It's so good. It's so annoying to play against too. It's like this card ridiculous. Is disgustingly good. It also blocks for 3. It's like what the heck? It's like you just get everybody can just have their cake and eat it with Aether Icebane. It's so good.
The blue is
blow
good
you
too. Out as well.
Oh
the blue can blow you out. Like you come in with your first attack, your 0 cost Draconic to like start your chain link, and you're like, okay, like I get to play 5 attacks this turn, and all of a sudden they're like, nope, you have to pay for this, and like it's just this card is really really good. I agree. I think it's A minus at red, and then probably I think it's an A minus at blue as well. To be honest, I think even 3 damage is really hard to deal with, especially if you're playing it during their turn. But maybe it's like a B plus there. But the red, I think this card is significant.
It's honestly very, very it's close for best common in the set, and it's funny because it's literally only Icelander card, but this card is like I feel like this set is actually there's going to be this is a major player in this set. I think we'll remember Aether Icebane and like how powerful it was and how annoying it was to play against.
Yep. I think we're going to talk a bit about what post the pre-release, what we think the best commons are and rares are, etc. But yeah, this is already very much up there for me. Next up, we've got Brain Freeze. This is a elemental wizard action at common, cost 0 and defense for 3. Has Ice Fusion as an additional cost to play Brain Freeze. You may reveal an ice card, of course. And I'm reading the red one here. So target opponent reveals their hand. If Brain Freeze was fused, put an action card with cost 2 or less from their hand on top of the deck. Yellow is going to be 1 or less. Blue is going to be 0 or less. I just think that the problem with this card is that disruption is fine and all, but the amount of cards you put into your deck that require Ice Fusion means less cards that are actually iced to Ice Fuse. You want those cards to be at a premium, like we just talked about with a card like Aether Icebane. And Brendan, I think you made such a good point with Succumb. I was a bit more stubborn on it, but I agree. The more cards you put in that aren't iced, the worse it gets for you. And this one just doesn't do what I want to be doing. I just think the disruption, like the previous card, right, is disruption plus damage. It advances your game plan plus disrupts the opponent. I think this is like C minus, maybe bordering on a D for me.
Yeah, this one's a hard D for me. The blue is playable. Like the blue is playable, but it sucks. Like it's playable, but it sucks. And it's like okay against something like Phi, maybe Jeremiah, some zero. But God, I hate this card so much. I'm actually really this card actually confuses me because it's so bad. I feel like I have to reread it a few times because I'm like, what is actually going? Like it's asking me to do so much, especially at red and yellow when I have to play it on my own turn, and it's asking me to fuse. And then this effect is just kind of whack, right? Like I don't know. Brain Freeze is it's pretty close to the worst, my least favorite common in the entire set. All right, heading over to Icebind. This is Elemental Wizard action at common, defense for 3, cost 0. Looking at the red one here, it says. It has Ice Fusion, by the way. It deal 1 arcane damage to any target. If Icebind was fused and deals damage to a hero, freeze a card in their arsenal until the start of your next turn. Yeah, so this is the kind of filler I actually really like. This card is good. It's a 0 for 3, which is pretty good tempo. I feel like it's basically strictly better than the other 0 for 3 that's available in the set. It's just a wizard card. It has Ice Fusion, and that fusion is very relevant. Freezing arsenal cards is powerful. I think that blowing up Arsenal cards or freezing allies, this stuff is just a bit more niche. But yeah, just tempoing someone's Arsenal like that, super powerful. I like the blue. I like the red. I'm not gonna be packing a ton of reds in my deck. It's not a high pick red for me, but as a resource card, I'm picking this blue for sure. So this is gonna be a C+ for me.
Yeah, I think this is a C for me. I think it's like you say, it's a role player. It's filler in some instances. It has relevant effects. It's the blue out of Arsenal, obviously, like is relevant. But again, like just the more of these you play, the less ice cards you can potentially play. That's what the spots you're fighting for, if depending on what you're drafting. So like these are the sort of cards that I'm looking to wheel and then like be options for me to play. The freeze, I agree, it is better than I thought, but that still requires ice fusion. So I'll flick it a solid C. Next up, we've got Polar Cap, another elemental wizard, non-attack action at common. This one costs 2, defense for 3, and has ice fusion as well. We're looking at the yellow one here, which says deal 3 arcane damage to any target. If Polar Cap was fused and deals damage to a hero, create a frostbite token under their control. So red's going to deal 4, blue's going to deal 2. 2 cost, 4 red. If you fuse it, you can create a frostbite. If it hits, I think this card is fine. I think it doesn't compete in the realm of something like the one that requires them to pay 2 or discard a card. But has some relevancy to have some sort of disruption. I think for me, this just feels like a C, like it's C to C minus, like it's a role player at best.
Yeah, so this is what I'm getting at when I talk about Icelander really having this divide between good cards and bad cards. Like I think that this is another, like this card is like significantly worse than some of its other counterparts that are available at Elemental Wizard, right? So they're not ice cards. This card, it's more playable than some of the other ones. Something like Brain Freeze, I think is probably terrible, but like it's like a hard C- for me, and it really is like tipping that edge to go to a D+, because like I really don't want to play this card like at all. For 2, dealing 4 arcane damage, it's not even getting me the most single amount of arcane damage I can do. The frostbite token, yeah, it's reasonably relevant, but it just is so unsurprising. I would rather just have like ice binds in my deck, have Aether Ice Binds in my deck, and maybe like an Ice Eternal and stuff like that, and then just have ice cards or generics or something like that, stuff that does more. So yeah, Polar Cap for me, C-, and just I don't want to play it. I really don't.
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you, like on this gulf between maybe cards and Elemental Wizard. I think once you get to ice, I think it closes.
You're right.
The gap closes a bit because of just
more utility too. But yeah, like that's the thing.
Speaking of,
yeah. Speaking of, let's get into it.
Off you go.
All right. Conduit of Frostburn. So this is Ice Wizard equipment arms. It says defense for 0, by the way, at common. Instant, destroy Conduit of Frostburn. The next card you play this turn with an effect that deals arcane damage gains. When this deals arcane damage to a hero, destroy a frozen card in their arsenal and has Quell 1. Yeah, so this ability is very niche. Unless you have the Ice Helm, which freezes a card in Arsenal, and it's effectively like a little 2-card combo that's a permanent. It does have to deal damage, so you need to put it on a relevant threat, but that is very good. This by itself is like a B to me.
It's Quell.
Yeah, it has Quell. That's why it's a B. It's like a B. It could be a B+ too, only because it's Quell. That's it. Like the Quell is good, and it combos. I think that you're not freezing too many cards without that headpiece. So yeah. B.
Yeah. I think, if I'm giving Quelling Sleeves a B, I'm going to give this a B.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I agree, though. I agree on all those things. I think the helmet's infinitely better and even still requires some setup. And outside of that, it's pretty niche, like you say. Next up, we've got Aether Hail, which is a card I really like just for the art, even. But
good art, yeah.
This is a 1-cost Ice Wizard action, defense 3. And says deal 4 arcane damage to any target. That's it. Red, so 3 for yellow, 2 for blue. I really like this card. It's ice. It can take care of heroes and allies. It's a good return on the 1 for 4. It's blue is 1 for 2, which seems like one of the better ice cards you can have in defense for 3. I think this is like in that kind of C+ range. It's like a really solid role player that you want in your deck all the time.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree with you. Like blue and red are like C+, and they're bordering. They're really bordering. This is really good. So the thing about the blue, the blue is obviously synergistic with your wand, but deals 2 arcane damage, which is much more significant than 1 because 1 is usually can just be
It's
getting
double.
Yeah,
Two's double 1.
true, exactly. That I might have to check you on that one, but I think it might be. But your 1 might just be getting hit by Arcane Barrier and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the 2 is pretty significant. This is a blue card that I really like to have. The red's great, right? You play the Aether Hail for red for 4 arcane damage, then you come in for 2 more with your wand. That's a pretty good swing turn for Icelander. So I really like this card. C+, could even creep up to like the B- range, but it's a role player at the end of the day.
The thing with like the 1 cost, and you said, it's 2 cards for 6 damage with your wand, right? That's really good. Like that's a good return on what you're trying to do with arcane damage. But even the other thing as well is like you can stick this in your arsenal. Your arsenal doesn't just have to be blue
True.
wizard cards. It can be this kind of card. It can be, okay, I play my I always forget what's the card that makes them discard unless they pay 2. It's a really good one we just talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Aether Ice Vein, right? And to reveal something like this, arsenal it, defend with 3 cards, next turn, pitch a blue, play this out of arsenal plus the weapon, and you know what I mean? Like there's other things you can do. Like your arsenal doesn't necessarily just have to be, you could even come in with a scar for a scar first and then play something to this. Like I think it's important to remember your arsenal you don't have to just use it for blue cards. Although obviously very good. So Aether Hail, good card.
All right, so next up we have Frostling. This is an Ice Wizard non-attack action at common. It blocks for 3, costs 0. And the blue one does 1 arcane damage to any target. And the red one does 3 arcane damage to any target. So I love this card. But just I love it a little bit less than Aether Ice Vein. But I still really like it.
The cross structure, right? The cross structure of 1 actually works out better in your deck.
Yeah, so I think you find that like 0 is pretty relevant because, obviously you don't have to, I don't know, maybe you don't have to pitch or you have the yellow, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's good. I really like these cards. And this one in particular. I'm going to put it at C+, still slightly under Aether Hail. That's what it is. But the real question is like, are you playing like yellow Aether Hails and like yellow Frostlings in your deck? Probably. Like those are like infinitely better filler than a lot of the potential like elemental wizard stuff that doesn't really do anything. You want to be fusing. I feel like you really want to be fusing in this deck. So it's C+ for me.
Yeah, I think it's just a C for me. I think it's worse than the hail, but it's like, yeah, I think the blue is maybe better than I'm giving it credit for, and same with the red, and then the yellow of this and both the hail are like just pure like kind of C- filler. So
yeah, you just got to remember out of Arsenal, this one and Aether Hail also give the opponent a frostbite by triggering Icelander's ability, so that can be pretty relevant.
That's good. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe I'm underrating the blue. Next up, we've got Ice Bolt. So this is kind of in line with what we just talked about. This is a Ice Wizard action, defense for 3, it costs 2, and says deal 4 arcane damage to any target. 8 yellow, 5 at red, blue 3. So it's the one up from the Aether Hail. I mean, yeah, I think where I'm landing on these cards is that Aether Hail to me is better because of the cost structure with your wand when you pitch a blue, but this card is still good. Like Voltic Bolt is still good.
Yeah. So, like, if Aether Hail was a C+ and Frostling was a C, this would be a C- in that structure. But for me, this is gonna be a C. Like, I'll actually play these cards in my deck. Yeah, I'll play the yellows. I'll play stuff like that because it's reasonable arcane damage and it's gonna allow you to fuse. I'm not super excited to play the yellows and stuff like that, but the red does gives you a good reach, 2 for 4. Kind of just worse than Aether Ice Vein, although it is a frost, so it's allowing you to fuse. Yeah, C for me, but the worst of the 3.
Yeah, you can't fill your whole deck with this. Like, you'd love to every turn make that play pattern we just talked about, right? But not always. And sometimes your arsenal needs to sit just pure damage in it. And there's times where you have to pitch 2 cards to be able to play. You're not always going to have infinite blues. You might have to pitch a red and a blue, play this plus your wand, and that's fine, right? Like, there is going to be turn cycles with that. And so this kind of card still has value. So it's a nice card. The blue still can play out of. You could quell 1. Flip it out of your arsenal for some damage and get a frostbite. Like, that's still a reasonable turn. So yeah, I think it's like a C.
All right. So next up, we're heading into the ice cards. We have Glacial Horns, Ice Equipment Head at common, 0 defense, but it says action. Action, keep that in mind, not instant. Destroy Glacial Horns, choose a hero, freeze up to 1 card in their arsenal, and 1 ally they control until the start of the next turn. Go again. Yeah, this card is fantastic. It's so good, especially against the more aggressive decks, just locking down that card in the arsenal. Obviously, you can combo it with the gloves, which I think is going to be a super premium pick in draft, is to have this plus the gloves. But yeah, I think outside of that, it's already an A- because of how much tempo it buys you. I really, really like Glacial Horns.
Yeah, I think I'm coming up on this card. I love Quell so much, and the card doesn't have Quell, but
Sure.
the fact it's action not instant is obviously irrelevant, like you say, but it's not that relevant. This effect is really strong. Um, I think I think this is a B plus for me, but I think I'm close to being on you with this being an A minus. But I think I need some time, so this is gonna be one I come back to next week. My kind of hesitation is that the games have sort of like the tempo's been really important, but the games have also gone a little bit longer than I thought. So like someone did this to me. I had this happen to me twice actually during the Uprising event, the world premiere, and both times it kind of did nothing. Weirdly, I think that was just a little bit unlucky for my opponent. Just when they did it, it was like I had a rupture card set up in my arsenal, and I was just kind of fine to leave it because I had a bunch of other cards that I could do. I actually had another rupture card from hand on one turn. But yeah, I think it's still good. I just think the upside on Quell is really high, so I think this is like a B plus.
So let me make a little case against this too, and why it's not like there's probably something I think is being a bit overlooked that is makes it less incredible, which is that it's an action and it has go again. So what you can't do is you can't play a non-attack action like Aether, Ice Vein, or something like that, and then swing your wand, and then see based on how your opponent's playing, you're like, wow, they just took 7 damage. They obviously want to do something, and then freeze their arsenal. You have to do it with basically 0 information, or of course, you have something else that have go again. So that makes it less exciting to me. Nevertheless, the tempo buy can be pretty good, but I think you're gonna pretty often be able to combo this with the gloves, in which case it's disgusting, right? Just blow it like a effectively like a command and well, you just blow up your opponent's arsenal, basically.
Does cost you 2 cards though, 2 of your equipment. So
2 of your equipment, yeah, 2 of your equipment. So it's non-zero, but yeah, just blowing up their arsenal. Sometimes they're not able to interact with it as well, which is pretty nice. So yeah,
very relevant. All right, next up we've got Eisenhower Weathervane. This is an ice action, 1 cost, defense for 2, and it said it's at rare, and it says the next time you ice fuse this turn, create 4 frostbite tokens under target hero's control. Go again. This card has been, I think, one of the hardest for me to evaluate. Sorry, yellow, it's 3 frostbite. At blue, it's 2 frostbite. I think where I've landed on this card is that I actually think it's good. It's quite good. And I saw this kind of firsthand, like just it being played against me, and was like, okay, this card is better than I thought. The fact that you do have to line it up on a turn where you can fuse means it's a cost, right? Like that is definitely a cost. And that's something that you have to weigh up. But I think, like, I don't know. I'd love to hear your opinion on this because you might have played with this. I'm still kind of a little lost.
It's also hard. I'm just like, I'm not a big fan, to be honest. Just because, I generally don't like to be playing cards like this that potentially do nothing.
Additional cards.
Yeah, and they can be dead. Build around, maybe, right? But it's like, it's fine out of Arsenal if you're actually fusing on your turn. Like, obviously, 4 Frostbites is probably going to shut down their entire turn. But I would put this at, like, C minus, right? Like I might be playing the blue. That's it. The rest I'm not playing. Yeah, I'm not playing the yellow or the red unless I need playables. Not because it's not powerful, but just because I have to be very, very sure my deck can consistently satisfy these constraints, or it's like actively a really bad card, I think. So it's just
what I do like about this card is that it's a nice card, and I think that is really relevant.
For sure.
I think you can fuse this and you can set it up in Arsenal. And I actually, like, the red was the one that I saw was like quite devastating, where I was like, oh, that seems like my opponent fused it and then stuck it in Arsenal. I was like, oh, it's kind of whatever. And then I was like, I can't play that, whatever. Then they defended with 2 cards, and then on their turn they just like played it.
Yeah.
And defended with 1 card, then played on their turn, like played this, played a attack, ice fused, and then Arsenal with the blue ice card. And I was like, oh man, they took my whole turn, and they're going to be able to like play on my turn plus do all this stuff. I was like, this is kind of bad, but a lot of setup. I think it's like a build around C plus B minus, and otherwise I think it's like C minus.
Could be even better than that, to be fair, because if you can do it consistently, I think it's a time walk. Like 4 resources.
Very good.
4 resources probably shuts down like most characters' turn. So yeah, I'm glad
it's a rare.
yeah, for sure. I'm gonna go C minus, like say assuming no synergy and shit and stuff like that. But it has the potential to actually be like a format warping like archetype in Icelander.
Potentially.
All right, so next up we have Arctic Incarceration. This is a ice non-attack action at common, blocks for 2, costs 0. Looking at the blue one here, it says create a frostbite token under target hero's control. Yellow is 2 frostbite, red is 3 frostbite. So the blue one, I like the blue one. Obviously, it doesn't do damage, so it's going to give your opponent 2 frostbites, which is like, I don't know if that's like an incredible amount of value, but it fuses. It's a nice card. I like it. It's a C for me. And yeah, I think it's a great role player in an Icelander deck.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that, I agree with all of that. I think it's a solid C. The red against low resource decks like a Dromai can potentially buy you 2 cards, which could be huge. So that's the only one, but obviously that costs you your whole action, and the blue at least you can play out of your arsenal. I think you're right. I think blue is like a C, and the rest are probably like C minus Ds even. But it is ice. Next up, we've got Cold Snap. This is a very well known card at this point. The art's been well seen. Ice action costs 1, defense for 2. And yellow says target hero may pay 2 resources if they don't freeze a card in their arsenal or an ally they control until the start of the next turn. If Cold Snap is played from arsenal, draw a card, and it has go again. I mean, the blue is the standout one in terms of, right, you can play this during your opponent's turn to like mess up the whole turn, freeze an arsenal card, replace itself because it's played from arsenal with the draw a card effect, and
play it off the chest as well, play for free.
Yep.
Like, this card
get them a frostbite. Like,
I'm actively picking this blue card very highly. I think it's super powerful. The yellow and the red are actually pretty good too, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Because you can play them on your own turn. Like, obviously, I don't think you're like super excited to arsenal a yellow Cold Snap or a red, but it's better than arsenaling some of the other red non-attack actions. I think sometimes. I
agree.
Especially because it replaces itself and you can often net 2 resources. So yeah, for me, I think the blue is actually a B minus, and then the rest are just C's.
Yeah, I mean, I've just got it at B minus because I think like even we talked about this before. You need ice cards. You need good ice cards. This replaces itself. You can't always have blue ice cards or blue whatever cards that work with Icelander. So even like a red, right? It's like, yeah, it doesn't feel that great. Like red might be like a C, but I think the yellow and the blue are both like in the kind of like B minus C plus range. That replaces itself. It freeze cannot be underrated. Like that card is that ability is really strong. I think so.
Yeah.
Cold Snap has impressed me so far. Where are we on to next, Brandon? We're going to sort of the final cards here. Wizard.
Yeah. So this first card here is going to be Spellfire Cloak, Wizard Equipment, chest at common, defends for 0, has instant, destroy Spellfire Cloak, gain a resource, activate its ability only during your opponent's turn, and it has Arcane Barrier. So I think this card really brings it full circle to me and brings me back to the Sandiki, I think it is, or whatever that card is, the gain a resource if you play the red. This card is very good. It's incredible. It's an A for me. This is like a quintessential A. If you're playing Icelander, you actively very much want this card. It's incredibly important in the mirror. Getting a resource on your opponent's turn, like we talk about having some of those like sort of clunky two cost attacks. Like boom, you got this. Now you can also activate your weapon without pitching another card. I think this card is actively incredible. And it totally is an A for me in Wizard. I want it.
Yeah, it's I agree. It's an A. It's so the Syndikai, right, doesn't have Quell, so it's just the flip it for a resource, whereas this has Arcane Barrier, which also has that added utility, which is really cool. So I think in like the mirror, this card is like super premium. It's probably like an A plus, but I think overall this is an A. Like the resource, it's although you can do it instant speed, and that does have some restriction. The fact that you're actively, unless you're actively not playing some Icelander deck that's doing less of the kind of on your opponent's turn thing, maybe this goes down in value, but I think in general this is going to be like an A minus.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got Dampen. So Dampen is a wizard action at rare, defense for 3, cost 2. We're looking at blue here, and it says deal 2 arcane damage. So yellow's 3, red's 4, and it says prevent the next X arcane damage that will be dealt to your hero this turn, where X is the damage dealt by Dampen. I mean, I think this is just a pure sideboard card in blue for the mirror. In terms of like, so at red it's 2 for 4, defense for 3, isn't ice, doesn't fuse, and is like a pretty low return. I don't know. Am I missing something? This card just kind of seems like a pure sideboard.
I think it's a constructed card, which is interesting. It's at rare because it's a cycle.
Yeah.
The blue, yeah, I guess it's playable as filler blue if you need blues, but that effect in the mirror, I'm not sure how swingy it's going to be for you playing this really dinky wizard card that doesn't fuse, costs 2, and only does 2. So I don't even know. Like in the mirror, like I understand the use case where it's like you're kind of getting a big swing on this, awesome. But I don't know about the other costs of this. So it's a C minus for me. And yeah, I generally don't want that card.
Oh, I think this is like a D, but like a sideboard.
Maybe okay, yeah, it is a D. Yeah, it is a D. I mean, I literally said I don't want it, but it's a D.
Best. Yeah.
So next up we have Aether Dart. So Aether Dart is a wizard non-attack action at common that defends for 3. It costs 0. So looking at red here, it says deal 3 arcane damage to any target. So this is zap, but it can also hit dragons. Basically, it's strictly better than zap actually.
It is.
Yeah, I think this card is a C because I think its counterpart, which is Frostling. Let me just make sure real quick. Frosting. Yeah, I think that it's like strictly better. Strictly better than this card, which is funny because I
agree.
Yeah, it's like a consistent theme. It's all, they also have that in Ninja as well, where you have like the leg tap, but they use the leg tap with text, etc., etc. So yeah, Aether Dart. It's a C for me. But I like the reds. I play the reds.
Yeah, I think this is a C minus. I think it's just strictly worse than all of those ice cards. The fact it's not ice, but yeah, I think it's like a C minus. And I think in yellow it's like a pure filler. I don't want that card, but blue's fine, I guess. Can take care of the cool thing you can do, right? And don't forget this is like you can flip the blue out of arsenal of any of these cards to target an Aether Ashwing and force them to lose go again, right? Like that is really strong. So don't lose sight of that ability. So the blues have a lot of a upside in those matchups, but yeah, be a C minus for me. Next up, we've got Read the Ripples. This is a 0 cost common wizard action aura, defense for 2, and Read the Ripples says at the beginning of your end phase, destroy Read the Ripples, then opt 1, opt 1, opt 1, separated by commas. That's it. Red, yellow is opt 1, blue is just opt 1, and draw a card. So after you've opted, so basically you put this into play, and then in your turn you're going to opt 1 3 times, 2 times, or 1 time, and then draw a card. So effectively putting a card in arsenal. I mean, this is a card that turns on your weapon. This is kind of not really doing anything else, and maybe setting up a good ice card or a good blue card to put into your arsenal. But I mean, this is not really personally where I want to be. I think this is quite fillery at defense for 2. I think this is like a C minus at best.
Yeah, so I think I think the blue is a C minus. I think the others are like
D's.
I can't even imagine putting the red one in my deck. Like I can't even fathom that.
Silly,
Yeah, like it just seems like it seems crazy. That scenario. Because like you're getting less variance with the extra opt 1. By the way, there's like Hayden said, there's commas, so it's just opt 1. It's not opt 4 or opt 3. Yeah, I think the card's bad, and even the blue is not exciting. So yeah, it's going to be a C minus and a D, just strictly filler. So next up, we have Singe is a wizard non-attack action at common that defends for 3. It costs 1. The red one says deal 1 arcane damage to target hero and up to 3 target allies they control. So I think this is actually like a B on the sideboard, maybe a B minus on the sideboard. Outside of that, I'm literally playing the blue as strictly filler. I guess it goes okay in your arsenal. Activate your weapon. It's reasonable. It's reasonable with 1 blue pitch to play this for 1, and then swing your weapon for 3 on the opponent's turn. So that's serviceable. Outside of that, I think it's strictly sideboard. I don't think you can play this red against like Fi or the mirror and stuff like that. So
yeah,
but against Dramai, it's good.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I think this is like a C minus at blue, and then a D at the rest.
Yes.
Anything against Dramai, but then against Dramai, I think red is like B plus A territory. It's really good. Like it's super important for these Aether Ashwing decks, and one of the only and best ways you can deal with like stacking Aether Ashwing. So yeah, I think red and actually might just be like an A against Dramai, but otherwise I think red is a D. So pure sideboard grade on it, except for the blue, which I'll give it like a C minus.
Yeah. And I totally agree.
Brendan, that's it. We've done it. We've done our Uprising limited set review for all of the commons and rares in the set. This set is super interesting. The format already, the seal format, I was actually impressed by. I thought faster than I wanted it to be, but I really enjoyed my Uprising World Premiere. We're going to talk more limited next week because we're going to be doing pre-releases this weekend, and I'm going to be personally trying to do a few drafts and stuff. I've got a box from the World Premiere. I'm going to be trying to draft all these sorts of goodies. What's your kind of, I mean, after just talking through it, any differences in opinion from playing to now we've had a conversation about some of these cards? Any cards move for you? Or
So yeah, I drafted Icelander, but now drilling down to the cards, I think that Icelander is going to be a really tough deck to draft because it like there seems to be a clearly good deck and then like a lot of cards that are borderline terrible. The one sort of outlier here for me is potentially like Eisenhower Weather Weathervane. Yeah, Weathervane. What am I doing? Yeah, just full set review. Breezed right by. I didn't even notice. Yeah, so like that one could be really good. If you're consistent like time walking your opponent, I guess that's good. it tends to be in Flesh and Blood the things that are more synergistic like that, especially in like draft and sealed, or in limited in general. I just like they're more cute than they are consistent, and you're able to execute them. But I could be wrong. Yeah, but Icelander, yeah, there's good card. It seems like there's really good cards and there's bad cards, which is really interesting. And I think that like in draft, because that is the solo hero, and you're really pigeonholing yourself to that really quickly, it's gonna be really hard to fight over that class, in my opinion. Outside of that, I'm excited to get more. I hope I get to play some more Dramai. I think that class is like there's so much, or that hero, there's so much to explore, and it's really interesting. And then Fi is very fun, very fun, very, you know. I played a more aggressive version. I did have a card called Uprising in my deck. I think Uprising is, it's not quite Channel Mount Heroic level, but I think it's close because it costs 0.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Like it's really swingy and it's actively like kind of unfair. Like it's so good. So yeah, like my deck was actually warped around that card. It won 3 of my games by itself. So yeah, I'm excited. I like the set like you did. It is fast.
Yeah.
It is not slow. I haven't seen the second cycle yet. Will people come out with sort of an archetype that defends more and fatigues people, or even just is more grindy? Probably, yeah. And I think that we'll see a lot more depth when we get there. But even for being fast, I tend to not like fast formats, and I really like this format. I think it's really fun.
So it's fast, but defending is relevant, which has not been the case. Like Quell really changes that, and I think that's a super cool mechanic. Whereas in Tales of Aria, I felt like defending was like like you were only defending to basically like trade specific points of like health for tempo. Whereas in this, it's like it's a lot more strategic. There's a lot of advantage to it. I think this reminds me of defending more in previous sort of like
Welcome to Wraith.
Yeah, which is really cool. And the defense value is on average higher, which is I can actually get around that. This might be a good balance. But yeah, I mean the set of I think one of the things I take away from our set review actually is like we kind of agreed on Dromai, we mostly agreed on Icelander, right? I think apart from one card. And then generics, we were like there were some differences in opinion on generics, but then like in Fi, we had like some real differences in opinion on like the Draconic cards and where those kind of sit damage versus on hit effects. And that's one of the things I'm excited to go back and revisit is like your kind of theory of the chain, combat chain versus my theory of the combat chain with the 0 versus 1 costs and where those are played. You know, Rupture 0 cost versus 1 cost versus go against at 1 cost versus 0 cost. So I think we're trying to do very similar things, but maybe at different points of the chain, and we value cards differently because of it. And I think both are correct, to be honest. I think it's going to be about which way you draft and which way you build your deck and which cards you open. So yeah, don't want to go on. We've done best bit of 3 hours on the Uprising limited set review, Brendan, but yeah, I can't wait to play more limited and talk about it more.
Yeah, go crush those pre-releases.
Those pre-releases. Rounding out, just want to close out the pod, Brendan. If you do want to jump on, follow us on Twitter. We're both on Twitter at FianDale, myself, or Fian_Dale, and at Brendan APG. Big thank you to all of our patrons. If you do want to join our Patreon, you'll get all these show notes, and our grades are all going to be up there when we load up this video and pod. You can check that out at patreon.com/Arsenal Pass. We do monthly sort of additional podcasts. Every time we do a deck tech, we throw up a full deck guide and sideboard guide up there. We just had a couple from this previous ProQuest season, including a guest spot from Tyler Horspool, and lots of other goodies up there. Otherwise, Brendan, anything to add before we close it out?
Nope. People will see that I just accidentally minimized all my tabs somehow and totally showed them like my background, which is a Arsenal Pass screensaver. But yeah, I'm excited, and I think that it's going to be a fun pre-release. This set has gotten me very excited in the limited format. I think they did an incredible job, and I'm excited to see how deep we can go with draft. And I'm looking forward to this road to national season. I'm looking forward to this pro tour.
Agree. All right. Until next time. We'll see you in the next one.